I had to leave. Everything was so unbearably wonderful. The only alternative to leaving was vomiting on the spot, which probably wouldn't be welcome in the lobby of a four-star luxury hotel. I could no longer tolerate a whole bunch of stuff. The hotel had been chosen by our resident hero, Ralph, and of course, like everything he touched, it was damn near perfect. Just one minor flaw would have made it tolerable, but there wasn't one. My perfect friends were even worse. Ralph, the guy every man aspired to look up to. He wasn't just handsome, he was a million times handsome. He was polite to the last detail, always pleasant, was the life of any party. He was the best buddy anyone could wish for. No bad breath, never a hair out of place, always fashionable. He was every mother-in-law's dream. And then there was his wife, Danny. Danny was loved by everyone, literally. There was no exception. Every girl had been trying to be like her since we were little kids. They couldn't even hate her for being perfect. She was too cute for that. Beautiful, though not outstanding, with a personality that just made people flock to her. Of course, all the boys instantly fell in love with her, and of course, since she was always Mr. Perfect Ten's girlfriend, she was always out of reach. Then there were Maria and Paul. Their role was to be the perfect cronies for Ralph and Danny. As they were, they had been a couple since the beginning of time. All they had to do was to admire and support the star couple, which they did with total dedication. They were a little cute, but not enough to distract attention from where it really needed to be. And then there was me, the eternal bachelor, the one everyone was trying to convince not to feel like an eternal outsider. Truth be told, everyone felt sorry for me. I just needed to get away. Away from feeling unwanted, tolerated. Away from the unbearably happy couples, especially Mr. and Mrs. Perfect 10. I just couldn't bear to watch them fall in love anymore. The perfect smiles, the cute nicknames, the loving looks. It was as if I was trapped in a sapphic romance novel all day long. And I knew they liked me for some reason and wanted me to be as good as I could be. They regularly tried to set me up with girls they knew. They assured me that they didn't understand why a good-looking guy like me hadn't been figured out a long time ago. It was beyond me. I walked out of the hotel through the front door and greeted the indifferent chaos of the unfamiliar city around me. No one cared about me. No one cared, felt sorry for me, or offered sound advice. It was like a breath of fresh air. I've always been introspective and a little dreamy. The anonymity was exactly what I needed. I stood in front of the hotel and for a few minutes just watched the traffic. The city was brightly lit and lively. It seemed like everyone was in a hurry to get somewhere, and me on this busy sidewalk seemed to be in everyone's way. Feeling unwanted again, I drifted along, trying to find a quieter place where I could just be. Finally, I found a darker and less busy side street. As I explored the less beaten paths, I tried not to think about what the others were doing after they had dispersed to their rooms. I paid absolutely no attention to where I was going. Ralph usually kept an eye on me and kept me out of trouble, but he was still at the hotel and probably taking care of Danny. I couldn't stop myself from imagining them doing it. Those thoughts distracted me for a while, until I came back to reality. Damn, things weren't looking good. Not good at all. I was truly lost in this unfamiliar city. The whole trip had turned out to be a disaster, as I knew it would, but that was just icing on the cake. I should have bought myself a t-shirt with a huge number, 5 inches on it, because that's exactly what I was. The eternal fifth wheel. I guessed that I would end up being buried as the fifth corpse squeezed into a 4-man grave. I realized it was partly my own choice, but that didn't mean I liked it. I imagined them all giggling when I wasn't around. They were probably asking themselves what was wrong with me. If at 23 I was still a virgin, what was my problem? Nevertheless, in my presence, everyone was usually discreet enough not to mention it. They still invited me on their trips, and I just disappeared when they needed privacy. The whole trick was to act like it didn't bother me. But I had no choice in the matter. I had always accompanied them, and I wasn't going to change a thing. I would never take a girlfriend with me, mainly because I don't have one. Never have, and probably never will. I was perpetually the lonely guy in the group. In horror movies, I'd be the weird loner who gets killed first. It sucked. Right before I left, those damn inviting smiles, those knowing looks reappeared. It meant they needed to get rid of me for a while, hoping I'd understand. Of course, I behaved as usual, ignoring their stares and patting them on the shoulder as they hurriedly retreated to their rooms. What looked like a normal evening with good friends at a classy bar suddenly turned into a miserable guy sitting all alone, holding his glass for comfort. I tried to act calm, like I was enjoying my gourmet drink, and hoped people weren't looking at me in pity. That pity was the worst part of this shitty situation. It was then that I needed to leave the hotel immediately. I was fine at first, feeling free and anonymous, until suddenly I felt lost. I didn't have the slightest idea of the neighborhood. Ralph was there quite often, so he suggested the place. The same Ralph who was currently enjoying Danny. Ralph, Mr. Perfect, Mr. Everybody's favorite. Your car broke down in the middle of the night? Call Ralph. Need a kidney? Ask for Ralph. A guy you can count on. Everyone's best friend. He wasn't exceptionally tall. A lot of guys, including me, were taller and more muscular. No, he was definitely fragile. He had chiseled facial features, almost femininely beautiful. He was always smiling, always charming. Women immediately wanted to take care of him, to please him, to get his approval, his attention, to get even one look at him. It was sickening to watch. I kept thinking about our little group as I walked, still not realizing where I was. This neighborhood seemed even darker, poorer, and less busy, which was fine with me. I wanted to be alone anyway, and the darkness suited my mood. I thought about Danny, as I often did. She was the glue that held us together. Everyone loved Danny. There was just no reason not to love her. The difference was that while I'd always suspected that Ralph's perfect behavior was a conscious decision and required some effort on his part, for Danny, being nice just came naturally. A slight noise from behind brought me back to reality. Where the hell was I? This neighborhood wasn't just less busy, it was completely deserted. I looked around, trying not to panic, and saw two shadows following me down the sidewalk. No reason to worry, I thought. In the city, this is to be expected. The dark clothing and hooded faces wouldn't have caused me such concern if two completely identical shadows hadn't loomed in front of me. Sighing, I realized there was no way out, and all I had to do was wait and see if my paranoia would be justified. Need help? One of them started the conversation. I wondered if he used the same phrase every time. No, thanks. How about you? I replied, trying to sound cooler than I felt. Yeah, now that you mention it. We seem to be a little short on money. Ha, what a coincidence. Me too. I wondered why they were even talking to me in the first place. That's funny, man. Tell you what, give us your money and save your life. How's that sound? I had to admit the deal sounded tempting. It's a generous offer. I hate to disappoint you, but I really don't have much, was all I had time to say before I was interrupted by a voice behind me, too light to be taken as a threat. It was a voice I was very familiar with. How the hell did he always manage to do that? Just leave him alone and I probably won't hurt you, he said calmly. It was Ralph, of course. Ralph, the pretty boy. Ralph, who was constantly underestimated by strangers. Ralph, who I was sure was looking forward to this. The boys looked at each other in disbelief, but then laughed. Who would you be? Shouldn't you be home with your mommy? Guy chuckled. How are you going to tell your mommy that the bad guys took your money, boy? Ralph stood with a lost and fragile look, shoving his hands in his pockets. It was too dark to tell whether his eye was ticking or his neck was reddening. Leave my mom out of this. Even without her, I'm your worst nightmare. Two of them started to move toward him, but hesitated for a second. Despite his non-threatening appearance, the statement was too bold to ignore. Look, I've enjoyed our conversation so much that I want to do you a favor. It's not going to end well for you, I added. I didn't really want to warn them. I just wanted to avoid a fight. Ralph was a vicious bastard when he was in a fighting state, but 4 thugs was a lot even for him. Is he some kind of black belt? The smirk in his voice was obvious. No. I wanted to add, he's a sadist, but I didn't. Worse, was all I said. I mentally shrugged. There was no avoiding it now. Take him, boys. I'll take care of it, the interlocutor said, pointing at me. They complied with his order, flanking Ralph, and I wished he'd at least take his hands out of his pockets. It was just plain insolent. I was interrupted, pushed against the wall, and tried to steady myself. I knew if I fell, I'd be dead meat. I may have been the biggest guy at this little event, but I wasn't a trained fighter. Ralph was, though, and while my dance partner and I were figuring out how best to start a fight, we were distracted by a nasty sound, like a bone breaking, followed by a painful howl. What the hell? My self-appointed minder said, briefly turning his attention back to them. I didn't bother, as I could imagine what was going on in there. Instead, I took the opportunity to punch him in the face. I hoped it would hurt him. I even hoped it would hurt him more than it hurt me. The pain in my arm was intense, and I briefly wondered how guys in old movies could do this for hours and still look fresh out of the barber shop. My movement at least got my attacker's attention again, and I took the opportunity to hit him with my other, still good arm. This time, the blow was less painful and had a greater effect on him. He stumbled back, and I thought my first training as an adult fighter had been a success. After a few hundred fights like this, I might actually be able to hurt someone. There was another vicious cracking sound from behind the talking man, and this time we both looked over. 2 of the attackers were lying down, but the third seemed to be quickly on his feet. Ralph and guy number 3 were circling each other, and Ralph had this look on his face. The look I hated. The look I knew so well. The look we'd all learned to fear since we were kids. He was my best friend in the world, but in situations like this, he was nothing short of the devil. In that gaze was gathered everything bad about humanity, everything that is revealed when the thin shell of civilization is stripped away. He was a predator on the hunt and derived immense pleasure from it. My companion looked a little concerned, but before I could deliver another symbolic blow, he struck out of nowhere. It wasn't symbolic. I didn't see it, but I definitely felt it. I also felt the wall help him by hitting me in the back of the head. This shit has got to stop, he commented, pulling a long, vicious-looking knife out of nowhere. Sorry, kid. I've never had to do this before, he added. Unlike Ralph, he didn't seem to enjoy his work and seemed genuinely sorry it had come to this. His head suddenly snapped to the side as Ralph delivered a kick with his foot. I looked behind his back and saw 3 figures on the ground. Ralph took the knife from him and dropped it into the gutter. You need to stop doing that, my friend, Ralph said jokingly, though I was sure I had never done anything like that. I wished his voice didn't sound so damn impassive. Thanks, friend, I replied, trying to hide how much it shook me. You saved my life. I know. That's what friends are for. You're my friend, you know? My best friend in the whole world. Just don't ever forget that. Right? I know, I replied, but I didn't feel it. The predatory face was still there, about to be hidden by the mask he usually hid behind to pass himself off as human. His features had softened, but his eyes were still cold and hard. You know, Andy, I love you. Honestly, I love you completely. You're my only real friend in the world. I'm just afraid that one day I'm going to have to kill you if you keep doing stuff like this. I had no idea if it was a joke or not. I didn't even know what he meant by doing shit. Wandering the dark alleys? He laughed like it was the best joke in the world, but I was puzzled. What the hell was wrong with him? It was a question I had asked myself many times. Unfortunately, I was one of the few who had seen the true Ralph. The sight was not a pleasant one, and it was getting worse. Dazed, I followed him past the still groaning group of attackers. The way back to the hotel was more difficult than I remembered, and I wondered how Ralph had found me. Had he followed me somehow? Why? It was scarier than being mugged. Without him, I'd only lose a few bucks. As it was, he helped create a life-threatening situation in which he had to rescue me. And yet, without a doubt, he saved my life. How did he know where I was? How did he know I was in trouble? He was supposed to be in bed with Danny. I was just about to ask him that when he silenced me with a tight hug. Next chapter. When Ralph showed up on my doorstep, there was no planning or preparation. It was just the way it was. No meaningful discussion, just two dudes hanging out. Two rotten pizzas, a few unhealthy drinks, and a PlayStation. I briefly wondered if Danny was busy and wanted to get rid of Ralph, but really the day was going great. As always, I kicked his ass at all the sports games, and he didn't seem to mind. More than that, he seemed genuinely happy for me. We played, fought, and argued to the point of exhaustion. I need to do something about Danny, he said suddenly. While there was technically no prohibition against dealing with serious issues, it rarely happened. What's wrong with you? You always seem so happy. I was still half focused on the game. I don't know. She seems so, I don't know, aloof, somehow, lately. Okay, what did you mess up? I asked, not really thinking about whether I really wanted to know. What? He snorted. Why me? Oh, come on. Danny is Danny. We all know she never messes anything up. And you're the relationship expert, aren't you? Ouch, that hurt. I'd rather not mention my most obvious weakness. Okay, so what's the plan? I replied, ignoring his teasing. Do you need to come up with something for her? Take care of her? Cook a nice dinner for her? Give her a foot massage? Buy her a nice gift? Take her on an unexpected trip? A gift? That's a great idea, man. Come on, let's buy it. I'm going to need your advice. Yep, advice from a relationship expert, I thought bitterly, but kept silent. Ralph's introspective mood was suddenly gone, replaced by an almost manic activity. I shook my head, realizing that the stores were about to close and that whatever he'd done wrong to annoy Danny, it probably couldn't be fixed. She just wasn't like that. She wasn't interested in material things. After a few minutes, he picked out a store where he could spend a moderate amount of money. The problem was that the store was already dark, which wasn't surprising since it was after closing time. Unfortunately for her, the young saleswoman was just about to close. Excuse me, could you wait a moment, please? She looked around, her face clearly saying, "No chance, buddy," until she looked at Ralph more closely. Ralph smiled his fancy catalog smile, and I knew she was done for. I had seen this before and knew exactly what was going on. She was a young girl of average looks, with average insecurity. Ralph wasn't average at all, and he certainly wasn't insecure. He knew the power he had over some women, and he enjoyed using it. If a woman had a weakness, he saw it and used it to his advantage. She looked at him like a deer in the headlights. His wide smile seemed so genuine. His teeth were whiter than the law allowed. His eyes were so mesmerizingly blue. Carefully styled hair, tanned skin, facial features like a model. She'd never been intimate with such an attractive man, and he would get his way. We all knew it. Please, you have to help me. I'm begging you. The problem was, he didn't look like he was begging. It sounded suspiciously like he was just telling her what to do. Not wanting to take her eyes off him, she just nodded, trying to unlock the door without looking at him. She finally succeeded, and we found ourselves inside the store, which was once again brightly lit. She moved as if she needed to use the restroom, but I knew she was just in a hurry to get home. We were distracting her from something very important. That much was obvious. Ralph knew it as well as I did, but he liked it, and I didn't. Come on, Ralph, hurry up. I'm going to kick your ass in the game. Relax, man. We've got all the time in the world, right? He added, looking at the salesgirl, enjoying his power over her. She only nodded, looking conflicted but powerless. I began to suspect that he was doing this purely for my benefit. It was a demonstration of his power over women, and for some reason he was doing it to impress me while the poor girl had to pay for it. He may have been genuinely concerned about Danny, but she had nothing to do with it. Not anymore. I'd had enough. Okay, I'm sure you can manage without me. I'm going home. You can join me when you're ready. And she didn't notice any of this and seemed to still be busy being surprised. However, his smug expression suddenly disappeared. He looked around as if expecting her to help him. Come on, Andy. I need you here. His arrogant confidence crumbled like a thin facade, and even his spell cast on the poor girl seemed to weaken as she dared to glance at her wristwatch. See ya, I said as I walked out of the damn store, angry at myself, at Ralph, and at the whole shitty situation. I thought it was just a casual night out with a friend. It was a nice surprise, since we hadn't had many of those lately. But instead it turned out that he was just using me like he used that poor girl, just so I could see this demonstration of, what? His power over women? His power over other people, including me? That he was more attractive than me? I was painfully aware of that fact, and I always had been. That certainty was the bane of my youth. Shit. Thankfully, he didn't come back to my house. Next chapter. Theoretically, it was possible to take turns hosting our gatherings, following an unfathomable schedule that Danny, Maria, and Lisa controlled. For some reason, we always ended up in my garden in the summer, which suited me just fine. I was the only one with a house, which meant I was the only one with a private outdoor pool. I suppose not being in a relationship gave me a couple of advantages. I could focus my time and energy on my career. I had just invested in a new grill, which, as it was absurdly large even for such occasions. Once the other men showed up, control of the thing somehow faded away on its own. Everyone agreed that I wasn't as qualified as all these barbecue PhDs and should concentrate on serving drinks. With a laugh, I removed myself and joined the ladies. As has become the norm lately, any group of women, including Danny, were talking in low tones with concerned faces. As usual, things changed as soon as a man came within hearing range. So, when are we going to meet Miss Andy? Asked Lisa, clearly trying to change the topic of conversation and unmistakably finding a sore spot. I could see Danny and Maria crinkle her nose. The only solution was a joke. Why? Are you interested? It's tempting. There's just one small detail. You have to kill Tom first. Tom was the gentlest person imaginable, but at 2 meters and 5 centimeters tall, he wouldn't even notice me trying to kill him. Tom, looks like I'm going to have to kill you, I shouted in his direction. Nothing personal. He only nodded absent-mindedly, giving me a thumbs up while he discussed something with Paul. Wait, Danny played along. Poor Tom hasn't done anything to deserve this. If our eternal bachelor has to pursue someone, it should be me. With those words, she theatrically clasped her hand to her chest and grabbed my arm with the other. Now we were all laughing hysterically. Danny was as unattainable as the Queen of England, only much more attractive. Suddenly, Danny's sweet face was replaced by an expression of horror, and I found myself flying away from her, obediently following Newton's laws, and landing on my back. What the hell had just happened? I looked up at Ralph's face contorted with rage. Stay away from my woman, asshole. Do you hear me? Ralph? I tried to calm him down by keeping my ass on the ground. Looking around, I saw open mouths all around. Shut up, okay? Don't make it worse. We all know what's going on here. I replied slyly. What are you talking about, Ralph? Asked Lisa behind his back, clearly puzzled. He knows, he stated, waving his perfectly manicured finger uncertainly in my direction. And she knows, he added, turning to his wife. Oh, come on. Calm down, Paul tried, putting his hand on Ralph's shoulder. Ralph allowed him to do so, but ignored him completely. I'm not blind or stupid, okay? He added as I contemplated how to change my current undignified position. I looked around, trying to see if anyone realized what he was talking about. Ralph's neck lost its dangerous red color, and he threw his hands up in frustration. Finally, he took Danny's hand and literally dragged her away from the group and into my house. As we stood in embarrassed silence, Ralph could be heard yelling at poor Danny from inside, but the words were indistinguishable. There didn't seem to be enough gaps in his lecture for Danny to get a word in. I didn't envy her having to endure this and briefly considered going inside to help her. Just as I was about to enter, I felt Paul's hand on my shoulder. "Stay. I don't think this is going to help." I nodded, just as an exhausted Danny reappeared. I could swear she looked a little guilty, like she was partially responsible for this fiasco, which seemed absurd. She hadn't done anything wrong. I pondered whether I should talk to her and assure her that nothing was wrong, but decided to stay away from her for the evening. Too bad, talking to her had always been the highlight of these meetings for me. After a while, the mood lightened a bit, and we started talking about more important things like sports and the weather. After a few minutes, I felt a hand on my shoulder and turned around. Ralph was standing there, holding a plate with a burger and a few other tasty dishes. The plate was too neatly arranged for him to do so. Danny had sent it to me as a peace offering. "Sorry, dude, are we okay?" I appreciated an honest male apology. Besides, I didn't like conflict and wasn't one to hold a grudge forever. We all knew Ralph had a temper and a tendency to overreact. It was no big deal. "We're fine." We shook hands, surrounded by relieved faces. Still, something was going on in the background, and it wasn't going to go away that easily. Ralph could go crazy, and there was nothing we could do about it. A few days later, I was headed to the store to replenish my supplies, which were still pretty depleted from the barbecue meeting, when I ran into Maria. One look at her told me that she was in female anxiety mode. She had obviously cried at some point and seemed to be barely holding herself together. She was obviously on some kind of mission and was going to hang on to the breakdown until everything was done. I immediately did what I would expect any man to do in this situation and put my arms around her. "What's going on, Maria? You look terribly upset." "Andy, this is just awful. I still can't believe it. No one could have thought this was possible." I just wanted her to finally get to the point. "Ralph hit Danny last night. I guess it wasn't the first time. She just never told anyone before. Can you believe it? Our Ralph. The sweetest guy in the world." I had a slightly different opinion of our Jekyll and Hyde hybrid, but I decided to keep it to myself. Women tended to have a very biased opinion of our golden boy. "Unbelievable," I said, though I had no trouble believing it. "Why did she choose to tell you about it this particular time?" She looked at me like I was the biggest idiot in the world. "Andy, you can be pretty stupid. Did you see her eye? It's hard not to." "Maria, I haven't even seen her since we all met in my garden. How would I know?" That detail didn't impress her. I could almost hear her thinking, "Men?" "Her eye was completely black, Andy." She was still looking at me, wondering how I could have failed to notice it. She tried to cover it up, but it didn't help at all. Then she had bruises all over her body. "Shit," I said, hesitating to say anything. "Would you believe she was ashamed of it? Like it was her fault." "Unbelievable." "That sucks," seemed the safe answer. "Right. When she couldn't keep it from us anymore, she started defending it." I only nodded. "I mean, Ralph. I mean, he's great." What's that got to do with it, I thought. Women always saw only the best in Ralph and didn't notice his ugly sides, simply because he was so damn handsome. They all wore rose-colored glasses when it came to Mr. Perfect. I had to put up with that my whole childhood. Was something broken? None of the adults even thought to suspect him. He just stood there, smiling and handsome, hiding the maniac inside. "We're all busy helping her right now. We've all decided it's best for you to stay away." "I'm sorry. I know how it is. Please understand." "What? What the hell am I even doing here?" That was painful. Danny was one of my best friends. Why was I suddenly refusing to help her in her time of need? "So what's going on now, Maria? Is there nothing I can do?" No, you have to stay away, do you hear me? This was accompanied by a stern look on my face, as if I was the one who had hit Danny. The problem was, I was pretty sure I hadn't. What did I do wrong? Come on. Seriously, Andy? Anyway, she's moving out, at least for a few days. She's staying with me and Paul until she realizes what she wants. Okay. Well, just let me know if there's anything I can do. Without another word, but throwing me another puzzled and stern look, Maria just left me standing there, still perplexed. Next chapter. Danny, you need to leave Ralph. Moving back in and forgiving him was a mistake. One day he will destroy you or someone else, Maria pleaded. Not exactly what you expect to hear at a typical barbecue party, but certainly true. I knew the topic had come up before and would come up again. This time, they didn't mind that I and the other guys were eavesdropping on them since it was already common knowledge. Ralph was the best friend anyone could have, but at the same time, he was a freaking time bomb. All of our friends started to let their guard down when it came to him. No one knew what to do with Danny. Banning him from being friends was impossible after what he'd done for each of us. Just stop, okay? I know what I'm doing. Stop pressuring me, Maria. I'm his wife and I'm going to stay with him for better or worse. Okay? Do you understand? He needs me now, and it's my fault. Among her other virtues, Danny was loyal to the core. The whole thing sucked. Ralph had helped each of us on numerous occasions. He just did it. That's just the way he was. He never asked for anything in return. All we could offer him was loyalty. It didn't seem like much, but it was actually a lot, especially in a situation like this. Maria only raised her hands reassuringly. We just want to help, okay? Danny's burden was certainly the heaviest. No one could doubt that she loved him. From the beginning, it seemed like they were made for each other. They were always the most popular, the most attractive, and the cutest in the neighborhood. Many people lusted after them, but everyone knew it was hopeless. None of us were around when it happened, but it seemed to us that they were born together and would remain so until they died in each other's arms. As much as it seemed like they were made for each other, their biographies were very different. Danny came from an upper-class family where she was safe and protected. To call Ralph's house a wreck would be like calling the Atlantic Ocean slightly humid. His mother had fled the scene at some point. She must have done it pretty early on, since we couldn't even remember her. His father was a very sweet man and clearly loved his son, but he had an extreme temper. I know you're trying to help, but I have to handle this on my own, okay? For better or worse, I said. I'm not the type to run away when things get tough. You should know that. We all know that, I thought, as I watched them emotionally embrace, their brief spat already forgotten. Despite Danny's clear statement, it was our business whether we wanted it to be or not. It was impossible not to watch their ongoing and ever-escalating drama. I'm so sorry, Maria. This is so hard. I know, Maria replied, snorting as hard as Danny did. Anyway, what happened this time? Pete brought me a burger. Danny, Pete brought everyone something to eat. That's how it always started. Someone was doing something nice for Danny. Someone was talking to Danny. Someone was just looking at Danny. You can't keep this up, Danny, I said, cutting into their conversation. It keeps getting worse, and sooner or later someone's going to get hurt. No. Stop bugging me, please. I'm having a hard enough time as it is. I can't leave him. He can't survive without me. He's my man, and I'll be there for him even when times get tough. The problem was that times had been hard for quite some time. Their problems had been escalating for almost a year. Why are you staying? I finally asked Maria after Danny had gone to fix her makeup. For the same reason you are, to keep an eye on Danny. It's not just Danny. You know, I really like Ralph. I mean the real Ralph. I can't even remember a time when we weren't friends. Really? Andy, is Honey the real Ralph? Has he ever been your friend? Do you really like him? Come on. Remember how he helped me when I ditched Dad's car in the middle of the night? When he took the blame when Mrs. Parker wanted to kick me out of school? When— I know, she interrupted me. But are you sure that's who he is? A nice guy who helps everyone, just loses his mind sometimes and relies on everyone's understanding? What do you mean? Have you ever considered that it could be the other way around? How unlikely is it that his sweet personality just leaves the stage to come back later? That he might be enjoying these fits of rage, that they are his true nature? That he can use us to cover his ass by forcing himself on us by being nice most of the time? Do you think? I don't know, I honestly don't. But I know why I'm staying, and it's definitely not for Ralph. Danny. Danny and you. What? I'm not the one you need to worry about. For some reason, she looked like she didn't believe me. While you and Danny can't get away from Ralph, Paul and I have to stay. You and her are our true friends, and we won't leave you alone while you roll into the abyss following Ralph. She suddenly took my hands in hers and looked at me with compassion. Andy, Danny may be doomed. We have to get used to that thought. But you, my friend, you may have to let go. Before she could continue and I could think of anything useful to say, Danny returned, and Maria left me alone to ponder everything and surreptitiously study Danny's fresh, unsuccessfully smeared bruises. I remembered the day Ralph had helped me fight the evil Ostrowski twins. They had once again ambushed me after school and started beating the crap out of me. I had always been a big guy, though I used my muscles for sports, not fighting. The twins were 2 years older than me and were evil bastards. They loved to fight and wore their battle scars proudly, always looking to add more. At some point during the fight, we all turned and looked in the same direction, feeling something evil watching us in a way only kids do. Ralph just stood there with his arms relaxed at his sides. Compared to us, he was a small, frail boy, thin to the point where people felt the need to spontaneously feed him. More importantly, his face was too handsome to engage in a fistfight. Nevertheless, we all knew the Ostrovskys were in trouble. Ralph had an eerily calm look on his face, as if he was in some private area. I noticed a slightly red throat and a ticking eyelid. This was going to end badly, and I didn't think it was worth it, but that was never a problem for Ralph. Come on, Ralphie, we were just playing, one of them tried. Bad move, I thought. He hated being called Ralphie. Ralph just calmly started walking toward us. The twins raised their hands placatingly. They had gotten their asses kicked by him before and didn't want to repeat, but that's what happened. I tried to help him in any way I could, but it was more of a symbolic action, and some part of me felt the urge to protect the twins. As usual, Ralph knew no mercy. Not for his enemies, not for himself. He fought without any sense of safety or justice. He tried to inflict maximum damage, whether it was appropriate or not. He didn't care in the slightest that he himself might be injured. I always wondered how long he could keep up that appearance, but he always remained virtually unharmed. A few minutes later, the twins were on the ground, and my task shifted to trying to help them rather than stop the process. Ralph was still in the zone and could destroy them if no one stopped him. I took him in my arms, talking to him, trying to look into his eyes until he finally returned to our world. Next chapter. What the hell was that? I was standing in a busy airport trying to find my damn luggage when I noticed I was naked, and everyone started noticing and looking at me. Terrified, I looked around trying to find some clothes to cover my nakedness. And then there was the doorbell. It kept ringing until the airport disappeared, and I woke up fully, but still a little confused. 3 o'clock in the morning. What the hell? This had to be important. Somehow I already knew I was going to regret later that it wasn't important. Stumbling up the familiar stairs, I made my way to the front door. Danny. She was just standing there, wet from the pouring rain, and there was blood on her once white shirt. Damn, this looked really bad. I swung the door open and dragged her inside into the damn rain. She looked strangely detached and passive, like a rag doll. Not knowing what else to do, I sat her down on a kitchen chair and examined her for wounds. "It's his blood," she said languidly, having read my mind. "Did Mr. Hyde come out again?" "Yes." At this point, she was interrupted by a bout of crying, and I patiently just held her until it was over. "We ordered pizza." "Come on," I began incredulously. "He didn't suspect." "He suspected." I smiled at the pizza delivery guy. "No way." "It can't be. I'm 23 after all. I know I'm not ugly." "Danny, this is getting out of hand. It's not jealousy anymore, it's crazy." "I don't know. Not directly. I have no idea. It was probably about me being too friendly with men, encouraging them, looking for a replacement for him. Something like that." "That's ridiculous." "I know, but there's nothing he can do about it. He's just afraid of losing me. And for nothing. I'm his." I sighed. I hated hearing that last sentence. "What happened?" "Andy, we had a fight. An unpleasant one. I was sick of his shit. Then it started. You know the one. The red throat. The ticking eyelid." "Oh yeah, I knew all those Ralph sayings. We all knew them by heart. Things got bad when he felt betrayed or someone was getting too close to Danny or his friends. As soon as his neck turned red and his eye ticked, we all ran away from the scene as fast as we could as kids. Except for Danny. Danny always stayed." "Yeah, I know," I replied, coming back to the present. "What now, Danny? As much as it pains me to say this, you have to leave him for good." "No, I can't. You don't understand. And you never have." "Huh?" There were those pesky hints again that no one wanted to clear up. It was lame. "What are you talking about?" "I'm sorry, Andy. You're a good guy. You didn't do anything wrong. I'm tired, though. Can I use your guest room?" "Sure, go ahead. You know the way." She often slept in the guest bedroom downstairs, though she never slept without Ralph. I shrugged, hugged her, and went upstairs to my own room, hoping the damned airport dream wouldn't come back. Seconds after my ear touched the pillow, I was rudely awakened by some kind of pounding. The clock showed that 2 hours had passed, which explained my confused state. I staggered toward the stairs again, trying to figure out what was going on. This was becoming a bad habit. I was greeted by a rather unexpected sight. The front door had been kicked in. Slightly less unexpected was the appearance of Ralph behind it. "Why didn't you just knock?" I managed to ask before I noticed the contortion on his face. Ralph looked like a caricature of his beautiful, model-like face. He looked completely insane, dirty, and most importantly, angry. He looked like some supermodel from hell. Another nice touch was the tire iron he was holding. I didn't know why, since I didn't have a single tire in my house. "Ralph," I blithely remarked, in case he couldn't remember his name. "You," he replied just as deftly, in case I'd forgotten I was me. "Where is she?" "Danny?" Who else, I thought. We're not going to win the prize for the smartest conversation ever. I came down the stairs just as Danny came out of the guest bedroom. I had time to notice the look of horror and shame on her beautiful face. With each passing second, Ralph seemed to deflate. Danny and I obviously spent our nights in different rooms and even on different floors. How could this even be a problem for him? There had never been even a hint of anything inappropriate between us. "Danny!" He suddenly spoke in a very boyish way, like a little boy in need of help. Danny immediately softened. Hell, he could still manipulate her at will. After hugging him for a while, she came over to me and hugged me too. "I need to go with him. He's too fragile. He won't make it without my help. Think about what happened before and what you want in the end," I told her quietly as she followed him. I thought she nodded, but it was probably just wishful thinking for reality. For the first time since we were kids, I hadn't seen any of my friends for weeks. I wasn't sure if they had seen each other. I knew I didn't want to see any of them. But the most unpleasant was Maria's message. "Asked you to stay away. Damn, I'm so mad at you." That really upset me. I hadn't done anything wrong. I was just supporting everyone as best I could. Maria was going to ruin our friendship with her thinly veiled insinuations, her refusal to tell me what was going on, her accusations. They clearly thought I was part of the problem, though I couldn't understand why, so I did what grown men do best. I sulked. The separation did me good. The black cloud in the background began to dissipate. I was tired of being accused of causing problems for other people. I started thinking about Danny much less often, only 10 or 20 times a day. At one point, I even became so detached from everything that I started noticing other women. I still wasn't ready to date anyone, but it was already progress. It was like I was going through a divorce, with all my friends, but mostly Danny. And then everything turned to shit again. I was quietly spending the evening watching pointless crap on Netflix when my phone rang. Absent-mindedly, I took the call without even glancing at the caller ID. Andy! Someone sobbed, and the fact that it was Danny's voice made me immediately go on full alert. Danny, what's wrong? Can you come over? Please. I decided that staying away from them was the best thing for me at that moment, and here it was. I'm on my way! Damn, this had to be serious. Danny rarely asked for help, and the fact that she was crying wasn't a good sign. I jumped in the car and tried to deal with the panic. I considered calling the police, but I had no idea what to tell them. A crying woman in the evening was no reason for a SWAT team. I hurried to their apartment to catch the concerned neighbors gathered at the open front door. It's okay, I said, trying to keep my cool, even though I still had no idea what was going on. I'll take care of it. No one believed me, including myself, but they left anyway. The living room was a mess, but none of my friends were there. Ralph was sitting on their bed, crying and not noticing me. Not wanting to alarm him, I quietly left. The door to the bathroom was damaged, but still locked. I knocked gently and called out to Danny through a crack that shouldn't have been there, trying not to alert Ralph. You! I heard him yell behind me. He didn't look good at all. His face was as dirty as his living room. Red, swollen, desperate, but with no visible wounds. Ralph, I began as soothingly as possible. Danny called me, said she needed help. I came over immediately. Is there anything? You, of all the assholes? Are you here to help? What? Why? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with you? There's nothing wrong with you. You stabbed me in the back after all I've done for you. I saved your life. Have you forgotten that? I was the best friend anyone could ask for. Is this how you repay me? What? What did I do? What? He simply shouted without further explanation. Calm down, Ralph, I heard from behind me. I called him. Danny, I'm not kidding. You know what's going to happen. I've gotten to the point where I don't care, she replied, surprisingly calmly. I quickly glanced at her. To my immense relief, she looked dirty, tired, probably bruised, but not seriously injured. I swear I'll kill someone if you leave me. It shook me to the core. This was too serious. Can someone explain to me what's going on? I looked around, finding no answers on either face. What the hell was going on? Everyone assumed I knew what was going on, but no one wanted to tell me. Okay, what now? Danny, you can't stay here. It's not safe, I tried to reason, ignoring Ralph, the elephant in the room. I'm surprised no one called the police, and no one was seriously hurt. Danny pointed to the huge bruises on her forearm that I hadn't noticed. See? That's what happens, Ralph stated, before suddenly disappearing into the depths of their apartment. Okay, Danny, this is it. It's time for you to go. Andy, you know I can't do that. Ralph will hurt someone. You hurt him. I can't let that happen. I wondered who she thought might be killed and assumed Ralph was talking about suicide. That's blackmail. Does he really need to stoop so low? Well, Andy, we can hardly judge him, can we? What the hell did she mean by that? Before I could ask, Ralph was back, and he had clearly gained momentum again. His neck was slightly red, but at least his eye wasn't ticking. What the hell are you still doing here, asshole? He didn't exactly shout, but the neighbors could undoubtedly hear every word. Hey, I'm your friend, I started before he interrupted me. Friend? My friend? Really? I didn't just hear him. I felt like I was standing in a wind tunnel. I hate you. I always have. Let's be honest, okay? It's all been a sham for years. I'm fed up with it. Do you hear me? What? Was my brilliant reply. I had no idea what he was talking about and assumed he didn't mean anything serious. You always wanted her, asshole. You know, I don't care. Most guys want her. It drives me crazy, but I don't care anymore. He looked confused at this point, and a confused and angry Ralph was very intimidating. But you, he shouted, turning and pointing at Danny, you're the one who's killing me. Ralph, calm down, please. You're making this up. I tried. Andy, Danny interrupted me, sounding calm and sad. He's right. Let's be honest for once, okay? He's right. This dishonesty is killing us all. Right, he added, in my opinion, completely unnecessarily, as I still wasn't sure what they meant to say. Okay, I finally said, mostly buying time. So, I've always liked Danny. I'll admit it. I mean, who doesn't? Liked? Are you kidding me, asshole? You've had a huge I love Danny sign on your forehead since you were a kid. Do you really think no one saw that? To be honest, yeah. I thought, shit, the cat was out of the bag. Andy, Danny said very softly, everyone knew. You think I was like that for no reason, you idiot? An angry, jealous asshole that even I despise? I always knew you wanted her. I always knew I'd eventually lose her to you, and I always knew someone would die if that happened. What, are you crazy, man? I replied, already knowing the answer. Yeah, he grinned bitterly. Yeah, I am. And you know what? It's because of you. It's not just you, asshole. I can survive another loser trying to get my woman. But Danny... She looked at me like she was embarrassed and shrugged. Danny? I asked. Some of what he says is true. I've always been Ralph's girl. There's never been any doubt about that. But I've always liked you. Very much. She blushed slightly, which was as cute as it was inappropriate given the situation. See? He shrieked. You've never been able to hide it. I always knew what was going on. Why do you think I pretended to be your friend? Hell, I never even liked you. They say keep your enemies close. What? I still couldn't accept that he was being serious. Andy, think about it, Danny interjected. Have you ever really liked Ralph? Well, damn it. I wanted things to finally be out in the open, but maybe not this much. Truth time, she added as they both waited for my reaction. Well, I'll admit that I mostly stayed by his side because of you. But why did he save my life back then, on that dark alley? What do you think, asshole? I followed you that night, and I still do from time to time. When I saw where you were, it was perfect. Saving you would have kept you from trying to steal Danny, if you had any style. But of course, you don't have any. Hey, I never tried to steal her. Really? Let's be honest, you don't like me. Say it and I can live with it. Why do you stick around? Why haven't you ever had a girlfriend? Because you want her, and only her. You love her, and only her. You love her enough to stay and suffer in silence, enough to live like a monk, enough to watch me get what you want. Confused, I could only nod. Danny added fuel to the fire, flaring brightly at that moment. Ralph shrieked. As his gaze ticked away, he grabbed a huge kitchen knife and looked at it like he was confused. I figured he didn't know who to kill with that knife, Danny, me, or himself. Danny, meanwhile, moved toward me, obviously trying to protect me and not seeing herself on his list of potential victims. Before I could warn her, he indefinitely threw the knife in our direction. Contrary to what you see in the movies, throwing a kitchen knife is not easy. Ralph had no skill. All he had was anger. The knife hit the wall harmlessly, handle first. All three of us were stunned. Ralph stared at his hands, disbelieving. Shit, he said simply, suddenly appearing close to tears. Danny boldly walked over to him and gently stroked his cheek. Ralph, I'm so sorry about the way things turned out. It's not fair. It was never fair for either of us. Ralph, I have to leave anyway. This has gone too far. He threw his head up. It seemed absurd, but he was actually surprised by her words. Yes, of course you do. Leave with him. I always knew you were cheating on me with him. It was always Andy, Andy, Andy. I'm tired of it. But I'll tell you this. If you go out with him now, one of us has to die. I'm not kidding. Me, you, or Andy. It's going to be entirely your fault. Ralph, please get help. This can't go on any longer, she said lovingly. Don't you dare leave with him, he shouted, unable to hold back. No, Ralph, I can't stay. I'm terribly sorry. I'll be back soon. Danny, please don't leave me. It was amazing how quickly he went from rage to tears to pleading. Was it all real, or was he just a brilliant actor? He tried every tactic he could think of and knew no shame. I was an unwilling observer of this undignified scene. I'll be back tomorrow, my love. With those words, she simply beckoned me to leave their apartment with her without touching me, which seemed like a good idea. Of course, we went to my apartment. Without a word, she disappeared into the guest bedroom, which I now considered my room, refusing my unspoken offer to listen to her if she wanted to talk. Of course, I couldn't sleep for a second. To my great surprise, a few hours later, I heard my bedroom door open. Do you mind? She asked softly. Just hold me. It wasn't just a tempting offer. It was the first step towards something I dreamed of my whole life. Even if it was just a night, it was worth it all. Yes, we had confirmed Ralph's fears, but it looked like we were still on some kind of roller coaster. We had no choice but to wait for it to be over, hopefully not in tears. When I woke up the next morning, she was still sound asleep. I guessed that the previous weeks hadn't gone to waste for her. I couldn't imagine what it was like to live with Ralph. She had her reasons for staying with him, and whether they were justified or not, she was a hero for putting up with it. The smell of the breakfast I'd made might have helped lure her from my bedroom into the kitchen. I tried my best, trying to impress her. The fight for her was wide open, and I would do whatever it took to win. Ooh, that looks really appetizing. I'm starving. Unfortunately, after a good start, the rest of breakfast passed in awkward silence. One of us should have gotten up the courage to openly discuss what we wanted, but it didn't happen. I certainly didn't want to beg her to stay, and I didn't want to coerce her like Ralph did. Of course I hoped she would leave Ralph, but it had to be her own decision. I decided not to mention it. Danny, you really need to leave Ralph. So much for that decision. She didn't say anything back, just looked at me sadly. It's not that easy, Andy. I have to take care of the man I love. I have to make sure he doesn't get hurt. Even if he does hurt himself? I replied, assuming she was talking about Ralph. She looked at me surprised and a little worried. Danny, do you really believe he loves you? What? Well, of course he does. He's freaking out about this whole situation. Okay, time to lay it all out in the open, I decided. Really? You know what? I think he's always been the center of attention and craves it. He needs the power that comes with it. He needs validation. He needs to feel important. What does that have to do with it? Have you ever considered that he's just using you? That he's just using all of us? That we're the stage and audience for his little dramas? She shook her head, but I could see that her faith in Ralph was beginning to waver. I'm not so sure, Andy. It seems like a cop-out. Yes, he likes the attention, but it seems like a cheap way to justify my leaving him. I can't deny the love he has for me. Okay, I replied, shrugging my shoulders and not wanting to get further into this minefield. If what I said was true, and I didn't know that for sure, it would be a blow to her self-esteem. Ralph would never love her, only use her. I understood how flattering it must be for her to be his chosen one, to be the center of attention with him, to see other girls wanting the same things she did. We sipped our coffee in silence. I tried to watch the expression on her face so as not to give myself away, and she was deep in thought. It was a big step for her to even think that all her struggle and suffering for marriage might have been in vain. All she would do would be to serve a purpose in Ralph's scheme. Suddenly, she seemed to come to a decision. I must go home. Of course, I did my best to hide my disappointment. I'd practiced for years. Hiding my true feelings when it came to Danny was something I really excelled at. I see. I wanted to cry, to beg, to scream, to convince her, but I knew it wouldn't help. It would have to be her own decision. If she accepts it, I will fight for her. If not, I would still support her, as I had done for a long time. For two people who'd spent the night in an embrace, the odd, awkward hug and stuttering stereotypes that was our goodbye were a little out of place, but it felt like a wall had come up between us. I felt like I'd played my cards too soon and lost. Don't worry about me, she said goodbye, but that's exactly what I did. As always, I felt the need to protect her, and as always, I never did. The next few days I was very busy, mostly worrying and imagining horrible things. On gray afternoons I would return home, once again reflecting on my shitty life. There was nothing I could do about this shitty situation with Danny and Ralph. That meant I couldn't do anything about the shitty situation with Andy either. I once again considered leaving it all behind and starting over somewhere else. It was a good idea, as long as I managed to ignore the fact that nothing like that would ever happen. Everything would stay the same. We were all securely tied to our roles in this cheap play. Suddenly, I felt a nudge in my back that came out of nowhere. As I stumbled forward, I thought to myself, this wouldn't have mattered when I was a kid. I would have just sat on my ass and watched what happened. But I was an adult, and so I stumbled like an idiot, trying to stave off the inevitable. Eventually, I collided with a lamppost in a most undignified manner before my ass did touch the ground. I looked around, trying to figure out what had happened, and saw Ralph standing there. He was looking at me the same way he always looked at my enemies, which disappointed me a little. I'd been on his side for ages, and I didn't feel like I deserved it. Ralph, I said, mostly to say something. You bastard! You asshole! You ruined everything! What? You, me, Danny. That's what you messed up. It was always just you and Danny. I've always been the odd man out. This was absurd. It was just the opposite, so I responded in the most obvious way possible. What the hell are you talking about? Ralph. It was Danny, sounding unusually stern. Where had she even come from? Ralph seemed just as surprised. His head jerked in her direction. Danny, stay away from me. I'll deal with you later. I didn't like the way that sounded, not at all. We had a deal, Ralph, she called out, pointing her finger at him. What did she mean by that? What kind of deal did they have? Her perfectly manicured finger looked somehow out of place given the potentially violent situation. The nail was painted bright red. I don't care, my dear wife. You've been cheating all along. You broke our deal. Surprising us both, Ralph punched her right in the face. Not very hard, but with a closed fist. This was getting to be too much. I was a peaceful guy, but this was too much. Hitting anyone was wrong, but hitting my Danny was unthinkable. I have no idea if my neck turned red and my eye started ticking, but either way I felt like Mr. Hyde for the first time in my life. I just walked up to him, flaming on the inside, and he just watched me. We both knew what was about to happen. At some point my fist would collide with his face. I did what was necessary, and he did nothing to prevent it. I didn't have much of a clue about the fight, but he did. Yet he just stood there waiting for it to happen. As if in slow motion, I jerked my hand away. His mouth turned into a sudden slight smile. His arms hung limply at his sides. It was unreal. I threw my punch, surprisingly clumsy and ineffective. My fist somehow made contact with his face, but it was nothing to him. A joke. A fly touched his face. He sat down on the ground with a smug expression on his face. See? he said, pointing at me, then at Danny. I knew it from the beginning. I did everything for you, for both of you. I was the best friend and the best husband you could ever have. That's how you repay me. But he didn't look disappointed. The whole scene resembled an amateur drama club rehearsal. I almost expected someone to yell in the background, again, but this time with more emotion. But you'll pay, he continued. Hell, you're going to pay for this. Both of you are nothing more than a whore and a traitor. Yeah, that was all we were. An amateur dramatic group, a handful of actors, a private party, a limited audience. We gave Ralph the stage he needed for his dramas. He never needed us. Anyone who had played the roles he'd written would have done fine. We could have been replaced, though he probably wouldn't have agreed to it. We were just unlucky enough to have fallen into our roles since childhood. Interrupting my musings, Ralph jumped up, suddenly grabbing his knife. Where the hell did he come from? Why did he suddenly have a penchant for using knives? This was something new. He used to like to fight, but he'd never tried to destroy someone. A change like that was frightening. I didn't look at Danny, but continued to hold the knife. I didn't know how she would react, but I felt strangely calm. It was just a role I was playing, I reassured myself. I had to admit that he wasn't a bad director. We were following his script without even seeing it or knowing about it. Now, having had an epiphany, I still didn't know how to stop doing that. I considered yelling line to try to get some guidance. However, I wasn't so scared anymore. Ralph was still swinging the knife wildly in Danny and I's direction. He was great at fistfights, but he didn't seem to have any idea what to do with that knife. Finally, he settled on me. He jabbed the knife vaguely in my direction, but I ducked easily and couldn't escape the impression that that was exactly what he wanted. To my own surprise, I didn't care. I was in some kind of zone, perhaps, as was often the case with Ralph. I was just functioning, doing what was necessary. What bothered me most was that I was slowly turning into Mr. Haida the Kamikaze, which horrified me whenever I watched Ralph fight. Finally, Ralph seemed to have come to a decision. I could see it in his eyes. His neck wasn't reddening, which meant he was out of the zone, which meant he was in complete control of his actions. I barely managed to avoid another blow, and it was much closer than the previous ones. This blow was going to hurt me. Suddenly, I saw Danny appear behind him. I had almost forgotten about her, and apparently Ralph had too. He remembered it when the board she was holding hit the back of his head. He lunged forward anyway, stumbled, fell, and lost the knife. Quickly throwing it as far away from me as possible, I looked at him lying on the ground with a strangely satisfied smile on his handsome face. See? I knew it. She always chose you. You don't know anything, you idiot! Danny shouted. There was never anything between Andy and me. You're paranoid, and you need help. Yeah. No one can help me when I have friends and a wife like that. He was surprisingly calm as he stood up and started to walk away. Don't say I didn't warn you, he added over his shoulder. Don't say that what's about to happen is my fault. It's all on your conscience. We just looked at each other, shrugging, not feeling the need to follow him or do anything about it. You should stay with me tonight, Danny. I think so too, she replied softly, and the look she gave me made my legs give out. Next chapter. Danny and I got into it. It meant we became a couple. It meant that we could start banishing Ralph from our lives. It meant we could live in love like we were meant to. All my dreams had come true, and all that was left was to fight for her. With her at my side, I was sure I could do it. Looks like Ralph was right, she said softly, while I was still floating on a warm, fluffy cloud. He was right? I replied, not really interested in him at that moment. We're cheaters now, aren't we? Technically, I'm still married. Yeah. We weren't cheaters when he accused us of having an affair. Now I guess I'll have to live with that stigma, I replied, before kissing her again. I still couldn't believe I was finally in bed with the woman I had loved for as long as I could remember. She only chuckled. She seemed to be just as happy as I was. I guess that's the way it's going to be. But that mistake will soon be corrected. Mistake? Choosing the wrong man. What? You know, when we were kids, it was clear I was Ralph's girl. My parents, all my friends, even you, didn't just accept it, but reinforced it. It always seemed that way. It wasn't that simple, you know. There were two guys I liked. Looking back, I guess I never really had a choice. Suddenly, Ralph asserted himself and clung to me like a burdock. It would have been nice to take a step back, to look at things, to make a choice, but I never could. Really? I asked, mostly because nothing more intelligent had occurred to me. How can you seriously doubt that? She seemed upset by my rather trite answer. Look, I didn't mean to say, and then I ran out of words. I was 15 years old, for God's sake. Yeah, he's really good looking, but so are you. If I have to choose an odd combination, I'll take rugged looks but a soft heart. That's you. His combination of model beauty and hidden ruthlessness has always bugged me. Either way, I ended up with the wrong guy without making an informed choice. Instead of answering, I just kissed her. He always knew, of course, she continued. He's a cruel man under a thin layer of sweetness, but he's paranoid, which makes him pretty damn perceptive. He watched us like a hawk, and he didn't like what he saw. It fueled his insecurity. We both tried to hide it, but it was an open secret even among our friends. We were confirming his fears without wanting to, which made him even more jealous and alienated me even more. It was a vicious cycle. But what could I do? I just tried to hide my feelings even more. I probably could have been more careful about that too, but I didn't realize how bad I was at hiding my feelings until it was too late. I guess the fact that I've never had a real relationship gave me away. I always loved you, but you were unattainable. No one could ever compare to you. Yeah, that's why he was always trying to pick you up. It wasn't because he was such a good friend. He wanted you to be beyond competition. We all knew it would never work. Maria and I always felt so bad about it. Yeah, despite that damn pity, I stayed in our group just for you. It hurt to be the fifth wheel for years, watching you but never having you, but I couldn't leave you behind. I wonder if he was ever a friend at all. I even wondered recently why he saved my life back then. I think he knew they wouldn't have killed me. He just made the best of the situation by escalating it and saved my life by making me stay away from you. You never thought he set it up? No. Then he broke a few arms. If he'd hired them, he wouldn't have done it. Come on, you know how he is when he fights. He's probably just overreacting. He likes it that way. And seriously, he's a good fighter when he's in the zone. But four thugs? Really? That easy? Without a scratch? I think they'd have a better chance if he hadn't caught them off guard. I looked at her, flabbergasted, mostly because I'd never thought of that. The whole situation was terrible, such a stalemate, and everyone was miserable. We were all acting like a happy group of friends. But then he got violent. Why did you stay then? She looked at me disbelievingly. Really? For you, my favorite doll. He told me he would kill you if I left him. I had to protect the man I love. In the end, I only stayed because he blackmailed me. Staying with me ruined him, but he still couldn't let me go. I'm afraid he'll do something really bad, she added, after a few moments of thoughtful silence. Like kill himself? Maybe, or kill us. Sometimes he said he'd kill you if I left him. Sometimes he'd just say someone had to die. I'm not sure he even knew who he was talking about. I'd hate to see anything happen to him. I know what you mean. Despite everything that's happened, I wouldn't want that to happen either. I guess I'm the only one who feels sorry for him now. Don't worry, Andy, I don't love him anymore. But I feel sorry for him too. I also don't want to start my new life by driving my old husband to suicide. He needs help, but I don't know how to give it. I have tried everything. He won't accept professional help. Now all we have to do is accept what is going to happen. I'm finally with the man I love, and I'm not going back to Ralph. I've only loved you since I first paid attention to girls. You're right to try not to hurt him, but we may need to fight, and I'm willing to fight dirty if I have to. So am I. Eventually, his insane jealousy turned into a self-fulfilling prophecy. I was always afraid he'd self-destruct at some point. I think we all played our parts in his little drama. We all did what we could to make that trip to hell happen. What? Danny, if we had been honest about our feelings years ago, we wouldn't have helped escalate the situation as much as we did. We were both trying to do the right thing, to hide our feelings from him and from each other. Everyone seemed to know what was going on, including Ralph. Because of that unresolved tension, we kept adding steam to the tank until it exploded even more. I think we should get your stuff out of your apartment. What now? I had slightly different plans. Yeah, I think we should do it right now. So you want me to move in with you? What? Well, of course. I mean, what else? I was surprised by this completely unnecessary question. Why was she even questioning it? I already thought it was settled. Okay, she replied nonchalantly. Let's go. But I'll sleep on my left side, okay? I had to laugh. Okay. And I need plenty of closet space. Yes, my lady. Well, well, your preparations are well underway. We took my SUV and drove to their apartment, hoping Ralph would be at work. Sure enough, the apartment was empty, and we grabbed all her clothes in classic raid style, hoping none of the neighbors would call the police. In a hurry, we stuffed everything into my car, trying to avoid seeing Ralph. During the getaway, the tension left us, and we laughed and cheered each other on. At home, she immediately took over most of my closet and bathroom, and I was pleased to see that. She could mark her territory however she wanted, as long as it was in my house. Our house, that is. Next chapter. Life continued as it was. I was happy. Danny was radiant most of the time. We both spent a lot of time in bed. Everything was the way it was supposed to be. You know, we should invite him over. Ralph wasn't mentioned anymore, but we both knew he was still looming in the background, waiting for an opportunity. I hadn't forgotten about his threat, and I'm sure Danny hadn't either. That's why I was puzzled when she said it. You're right, Maria nodded with a serious look. She was here to plan the next reunion of friends, and I somehow assumed that Ralph would be excluded from now on. He's probably having a hard enough time losing Danny as it is. There's no need for him to lose all his friends, Maria continued. Danny looked at me, and I immediately realized that her motivation was somewhat different. I guessed that she wanted to keep her enemy close, but I had my doubts about that strategy. After all, it hadn't really worked with Ralph. Yes, she said. There's no need to exclude him. Maria, would you do me a favor and ask him? Things aren't going well with him and me. Of course, sweetheart, Maria replied in her typically motherly manner, putting her hand on Danny's arm reassuringly. Don't worry, I'll take care of it. Later, when Maria left, I brought it up again. Are you sure that was wise? Of course she knew what I was talking about. No, I'm not sure. But do you want to live like that? Looking over your shoulder all day long? Worrying if something's happened to someone you love? Yeah, you're right. If this goes on much longer, I'll be the next paranoid lunatic. I hate it when you leave the house alone. I've noticed, but I can't drag you with me when I meet a friend or go to work. I don't want to live in a prison. That needs to be resolved. Okay, Danny. I don't think he'll completely lose his temper with everyone around. She nodded, but looked as hesitant as I did. The meeting was pretty tense. Danny and I made no secret of the fact that we were a couple, but we were careful not to go overboard in showing our affections. Most of our friends seemed to approve and even pleased, but some seemed to frown. In general, everyone tried to ignore the elephant in the room and pretended to have a good time. I could have sworn everyone flinched when the doorbell rang. Despite all the planning and agreeing that it was for the best, I wished he hadn't come. I even expected him not to come, but he was the only one absent and no one had ordered a pizza. For several agonizing seconds, no one moved until Maria, as our hostess, finally worked up the courage to open her apartment door. Ralph? We heard her exaggeratedly friendly exclamation. I'm so glad you could come. I didn't hear his reply, but we all watched as he entered the living room, trying to portray his usual confident smile. This time it seemed screwed on and obviously fake, but the meaning was clear. It's no big deal. I'm still in charge. All talking stopped and we all looked at him like he was an idiot. The scene was awkward even before the background music suddenly stopped. As a result, it felt like time had stopped. This is what hell is like, I thought. Finally, Paul broke the spell by jumping up and taking over the music. Everyone immediately started doing something, and most of it didn't make much sense. Finally, Ralph deigned to look at Danny and me. His eyes were cold as he gave us an exaggeratedly loud thumbs up and an incredulous wink. The message was clear. He didn't care. I could have Danny. She could easily be replaced. His reputation was intact. Except it wasn't. He was tense as a bowstring. He moved like a robot. He was constantly looking around for confirmation. This was not the confident Ralph we knew. Worst of all was the pity, which I had encountered often enough. Now he was the odd man out, with the comfort and good advice of the girls heaped upon him. He tried to bear everything stoically, making sure to stay away from Danny or me. After a few minutes, I heard Lisa telling him about a cute single coworker, and that if he played his cards right, he could get a date with her. Damn, I thought. That was unnecessarily cruel, even though I knew she meant well. Mesmerized, I watched his neck take on a horrible reddish hue. Lisa hadn't grown up with Ralph like we had, so she might not have known his signs. Completely oblivious, and with only good intentions, she continued her search. Ralph, don't worry. Some nice girl will hook you up in no time. Mesmerized, I watched Ralph slowly continue to cook inside me. I could almost hear his thoughts. He was a doomsayer, the guy all women lusted after. He certainly didn't need pity or reassurance that he could get the girl. It was a humiliating demonstration, but I didn't want to make matters worse by interfering with it. It would certainly put a landmine under the nose he was currently on. I feel so sorry for you. I mean, when you get dumped like that? Oh shit, just when I thought it couldn't get any worse. I was afraid he was going to kill her on the spot, but he just roughly shoved her aside. She was clearly shocked that the handsome man she had always liked could behave like that. Ralph looked around, his gaze settling on Maria, who was the only truly attractive woman in the room, aside from Danny. To our collective shock, he just kissed her. I have no idea what he was thinking. Perhaps he wanted to demonstrate that he could easily get any woman he wanted. As soon as she came to her senses, she shoved him back and slapped him hard. The sound was deafening as all talking stopped anyway. Paul was just about to help her when we all saw her pull her knee back for a good old-fashioned kick between the legs. Ralph saw it too, tried to duck and fell into a large flower pot. The result was horribly undignified. He was lying in the dirt after being rejected in the most public way. He had completely humiliated himself, and the worst part was that everyone, including me, felt sorry for him at that moment. Everyone saw him in a new light. The collective rose-colored glasses were off, and he knew it. This time it wasn't just his neck that was red, but his entire face. Strangely, he turned to me for help. I realized that I'd always been his helper and wingman, even though it now seemed that we had long since fallen out of love. But not this time. Not when 14 people looked at him in awkward silence, when they turned from friends to those who knew him, when he suddenly looked like a little lost boy, smiling, confused. The drama has reached its final act. By and large, Ralph's role had become that of a tragic loser, humiliated, and leaving everyone disappointed. It was the ultimate defeat. I watched him while Danny looked away, no longer wanting to help him or even watch this undignified spectacle. There was a glimmer of understanding in his eyes. He had looked at her as the moon, reflecting only his light. Now she was the sun, and he seemed to have suspected it all along. I suddenly realized that he had never really looked at her, never seen her for the treasure she was until she left him for me. It was as if he was finally able to step out of his role, to see things for what they were, and mourn the missed opportunities. Remembering our childhood, a time when our friendship was still pure, and determined to be the bigger man, I reached out to him one last time. He accepted it gratefully, but knew from my eyes that it was intended. We were done. He stood up, looked around for support, and saw only what hurt the most: pity. I'd never seen him so weak, so defeated. Worst of all, I knew how he felt. He was on the verge of a breakdown. Without another word, he turned and walked away before we could see this final humiliation. Isn't it amazing how hot it is already? After all, it's only May, Paul said suddenly. Amazing, isn't it? Hey, is there any potato salad left? Tom contributed as if nothing had happened. Soon we heard the girls giggling over some nonsensical nonsense someone had found on the internet. I looked at Danny, and we shrugged at the same time. It was like Ralph didn't even exist. It was just that everyone had decided not just to exclude him from the group, but to delete him as if he'd never existed. We honestly didn't care anymore. He disappeared from our lives, and as far as I know, no one ever heard from him again. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video. Last year, Father's Day started out as usual. I always woke up first. I never got a good night's sleep, so I knew it would be quite a while before my 18-year-old wife and my 18 and 17-year-old girls woke up and joined me. Every year for Mother's Day, I made my wife a nice breakfast of mimosas. For lunch, I would make her a cheese, fruit, and nut plate with a bottle of good white wine. For dinner, I would make her favorite dinner: grilled steak and baked potatoes paired with a good Cabernet Sauvignon. When the girls were younger, they helped with breakfast and the obligatory waiting for Mom, but as they got older, I was left alone to pamper them. No big deal. My wife usually reciprocated by cooking me a special breakfast, although on Father's Day I cooked steaks for dinner. So last year on Father's Day, I waited until my wife woke up to make me breakfast, which doesn't happen on any other day of the year. She doesn't know it, but I usually eat something small when I wake up around 6. I would starve to death if I didn't eat until she wakes up around 9, which is early for her on the weekend. When she woke up, she gave me a kiss, wished me a happy Father's Day, and started making a special breakfast for the family. For lunch, we went to a kitschy little cafe with Doctor Who-themed sandwiches, and overall it was a good day. My wife is a slave to the calendar and knows when all the important dates fall. She manages everything from holidays to the kids' activities with a dry erase calendar hanging on the side of the kitchen cabinet. All holidays, milestones, school events, half-days, etc. are recorded on the calendar. Nothing is ever missed. Except when I miss something, of course. The next year, when my wife was putting the dates on the calendar at the end of May, she said, "Hey, Bill, your birthday falls on Father's Day this year." It wasn't the first time, so I wasn't surprised. I said, "Nice. Don't save money and cheat me if I don't get 2 gifts." Kathy replied with a laugh, "You'll never leave me alone if you get cheated out of a gift. I'm going to have to do something special for you this year." I kissed her cheek and squeezed her ass as I walked out of the kitchen. I hoped she meant something more than the annual birthday and Father's Day blowjobs. She started giving me blowjobs when we were making regular love, but never finished them. They were usually part of foreplay, except for those 2 days when she brought it to an end, so to speak. On my birthday and Father's Day, she would give me a good blowjob, not expecting to get one in return. I usually brought her to orgasm when she did. I wasn't a complete idiot about it. I was horny and thought I was going to get super rare anal sex on my upcoming special day. The weeks leading up to my big day were strange in our house. My wife was acting strange. She was working late, snapping at me and the girls about little things, and she started dressing for work more often. She worked as the bakery manager at our local grocery store. She had never worn makeup before, but around this time she began to do so. She also wore a scarf over her clothes, which consisted of a white button-down shirt and pants. She would leave another button undone, which further showed off her ample cleavage. I started to have my doubts when, on the Friday before my birthday, she went somewhere without me. We often met together with a core group of married couples, so she rarely went out with the girls alone. If someone was going out for a drink and invited her along, she would let me know the place and I would meet them. It's not like I was an ogre and wouldn't let her do things on her own. She always said she enjoyed her time more if I was with her. It made me feel good, and I thought our marriage was pretty strong because of little things like that. For my part, I didn't do much without her outside of our social circle either. It just worked for us. We weren't party people or big drinkers. Our idea of a nice Friday night was just hanging out on the couch together and watching a couple of movies. That's why I was surprised to see her coming down the stairs that Friday, dressed to the hilt. She was wearing a new short skirt, nude stockings, and high-heeled shoes. She had also clearly been to the tanning salon and had her hair done. I whistled and asked, "Shit, honey, did I forget about the fact that we're going out? Let me get dressed real quick." "No, Bill. I'm going out with a few people from work. I thought you could order a pizza for yourself since our girls are going out too." I was shocked. She had never mentioned it, and it wasn't on her precious calendar. "Oh? You didn't tell me you had plans. I thought we'd finish our shows tonight." A look of fear appeared on her beautiful face, but then she pulled herself together and softened. "I'm sorry, babe. I was just asked today." I made it a point to look her over from head to toe and said, "So you just found out today, and in the hour you were at work before me, you bought a new skirt, went tanning, and got your hair done?" I was getting angry. She was lying to me, but I couldn't prove it. I couldn't believe she could cheat on me. It was out of character. She was the epitome of a suburban soccer mom's wife and mother. Our sex life was great. We still made love several times a week. She had no reason to cheat on me. She snapped back, "I worked half a day today. I wanted to look good for a change." Before I could respond, she was out the door without another word, leaving me wondering what the hell had happened. I waited for her, and she came home just before midnight. Her hair was no longer lying down, but was put up in a regular ponytail. So much for the hairstyle. She walked past me without a word and went upstairs. A few minutes later, I heard the shower running. I could only shake my head and wonder what she had done that she had to shower before bed. She didn't come down and say goodnight before going to bed. I realized that something was wrong in my perfect little world, and wondered how wrong. I work in the retail industry, so I was at work on Saturday morning. Usually when I was getting ready for work, she would wake up and kiss me goodbye before going back to bed. That morning I got nothing. Once again, I was shocked. When I got to the store, I saw Missy waiting at the entrance. Missy was the morning barista at our big store's coffee shop. She was a pretty red-haired girl whose blue eyes were striking. As happily married as I was, I couldn't help but take notice of her. I had always liked redheads. "Hey, Bill," she called out as I approached the entrance. It was still locked, since it was a half hour before the store opened. The guys on the night crew could have let her in, but as she had told me before, she didn't feel comfortable alone in a store with a bunch of guys. "Good morning, Missy," I said as I opened the doors in front of us. "What's wrong, Bill?" "You look like someone killed your cat." "I'm sorry, I have a lot on my mind today." She gave me a strange look, but left it at that. "Give me a few minutes and I'll pour you a cup of our best." I forced myself to smile and said, "Sounds good. I'll see you soon." I locked the doors as she hurried to get the cafe ready for the morning rush. I knew she would be very busy once the store opened. Our little cafe was always crowded in the mornings. As I walked the floor, I would check on the crews who were preparing their departments. I always went around the departments in the morning. This was not necessary as I had a very good team of department managers, but it gave me a chance to say hello and make small talk. I felt it was important to maintain a good relationship with my team members, and I think they appreciated my efforts. The last stop on my walk was a coffee shop where Missy had my large black coffee waiting for me. "Here you go, boss. 1 cup of Megamart's best beer." "Thanks, Missy." I put $2 on the counter. "No, Bill. He's in the house today." "No way, Missy. I pay for everything here. The last thing I need is someone getting mad at me and calling corporate to denounce me." She gasped. "Bill, I would never—" "I didn't mean you, Missy. I can't take any chances, even for a $2 coffee. You'd be surprised at the things I have to put up with if I deny someone a day off or cut overtime. It's just unreasonable." "All right, boss. Fair enough." I waved goodbye and sipped from my mug. I'm sure some of the employees got free coffee from time to time. There's no way to track it, and who needs to? Too much work because of cheap coffee. I can't imagine watching hours of video to make sure everyone paid. It was different for me. Being in charge of a company was a risk. Employees lost their temper over the dumbest things. I had HR called on me because I was enforcing parking regulations. Seriously, calling HR because you have to park in your backyard. That's ridiculous. The day ended and went pretty quietly. The thing that excited me the most was the old lady who stole the cat food and bird food. It was exactly the kind of day I needed. I was busy enough not to ruminate on my new problems with my wife, but not so busy that I couldn't get everything done on time. When I walked through the door of the house, my wife and daughters were on their way out. I was surprised for a moment, but I looked at the calendar. "Bye, Daddy," my daughter said, kissing me on the cheek goodbye. My loving wife said nothing. They were going to a concert with other moms and daughters. It had been planned a long time ago and was on the calendar, but as usual, I forgot. I was hoping that I would have a chance to talk to Katie and figure out what was going on. I hated not knowing what she had done the night before. After not thinking about it all day, there was nothing left for me to do but ruminate about it tonight. I took this opportunity to do a bit of fooling around. I checked her email but figured it wouldn't work, and it did. No one else was sending emails. She had a cell phone, so I couldn't check her messages or call log. I went over to the hamper to check her clothes from the evening, but since it was Saturday, she had already done her laundry. I accomplished nothing, and after watching the movie, I went to bed feeling no better than before. I woke up on my birthday and Father's Day and started my day as usual. I ate a couple slices of toast, drank some coffee, and sat on the terrace to enjoy the morning. It was a gorgeous day. I enjoyed the birds chirping and wondered what this special day had in store for me. Around 9, I went into the house to refill my coffee and was surprised to see that my wife and daughters were already up and packing lunch. "What's going on?" I asked, wondering why they didn't make me get ready to go somewhere. My daughter Jill said, "We're going to the beach." "Oh," I said, and went upstairs to get dressed for the lake. As I was putting on my shirt, I heard my daughter Jenny yell out, "Bye, Daddy! See you later." The door slammed shut, and I looked out the window to see my wife and daughters leaving. I couldn't believe it. I didn't expect the girls to remember my birthday. I had to remind them of their mother's birthday and Mother's Day, but I couldn't understand Katie not remembering. I walked down the stairs and heard my cell phone ring. I rushed over there, hoping they understood and were going to tell me they were coming back for me, but no. It was my mom. "Hey, Billy. Happy birthday and Father's Day." "Thank you, Mom." "Kathy has big plans for you guys today?" "No. She took the girls to the beach a few minutes ago." "Really? That's not like her. I'd bet she'd make you a delicious breakfast and make this day special for you." "Yeah, I honestly don't know what's going on right now. She's been acting weird for weeks now." "Well, don't make a fuss. She probably has something special planned for later. I've got to get to church. Love you, Billy." "Love you, Mom." You had to love my mom. She was an eternal optimist, and she loved Kathy as if she were her own flesh and blood. She and Kathy had visited each other regularly since my dad had died a few years before. Kathy wanted to make sure that Mom wasn't too lonely. I was standing there wondering what the hell was going on with my marriage when the phone rang again. It was my assistant, Anne. "Bill, we had an incident at the coffee shop this morning." "What's wrong?" Missy was on the stairs when she was pushed by a customer. "She lost her balance and fell." "Oh my God!" "Is she okay?" "They took her to St. Alex's Hospital to get x-rays. She might have a broken arm or something." "Damn!" "Poor girl. Do you have a shift?" "Yeah, it's all set. I just didn't want you to catch me off guard tomorrow. I'm sorry I bothered you on Father's Day." "Don't worry about it, Anne. Thanks for calling. I was hoping Missy would be okay." I fiddled around the house for a while and, figuring they weren't coming back, headed to IHOP for breakfast. It turned out to be a mistake for my state of mind. The wait was long, and everywhere I looked there were families. Happy families celebrating fathers and grandfathers. I left before I started crying. I made my way through McDonald's and got a big breakfast of coffee and orange juice. The pancakes were surprisingly tasty as I sat in the park and ate with a plastic fork and knife. I looked out at the small lake I used to take my girls boating on when they were little. They loved the water. Whether it was swimming, boating, or even fishing, they loved being on the lake. As they got older and almost went to college, they lost interest in fishing, and looking back, I think they lost interest in spending time with me at all. In those days, all their outings were with their mother. Probably the right thing to do. Shopping for clothes with my father, I'm sure, would have been burdensome for a young girl. At 1 o'clock, there was no word from my wife. I could only assume that there would be no dinner together. I stopped by the Doctor Who cafe and ordered a Reuben. Of course, the name was related to the show, like the Dalek Reuben Revolution or something equally silly. Being a 40-year-old man who has no idea what's cool and what's not, I took a picture and registered on Facebook. I got the usual likes and Happy Father's Day greetings from my friends and acquaintances. Oddly, my mother-in-law commented that she thought I was at the beach with my wife and girls. Apparently, my wife had been posting beach pictures on her Facebook page. I finished my sandwich and headed to a sports bar near my house. I hadn't watched a ball game in a while, so I decided to drown my sorrows in Miller Lite. The bar was crowded, and I wasn't in the mood for it, so I went to the cigar lounge next door and treated myself to a $60 Opus X. Happy birthday to me. I sat down at a table and turned on the Sox game, and a couple guys playing cards invited me to join them. "I'm Bill," I said, introducing myself to the older gentleman. "I'm Lance, and this is my brother Jerry. It's nice to meet you both." They finished their hand and dealt me in their little 5-card game. "Help yourself, Bill," Lance said, setting the cooler on the floor. I thanked him and pulled out a Miller Lite. "No kids? Or is the ex having them with a new man?" asked Jerry with a smirk. I frowned and said, "My wife and the girls are at the beach. They don't seem to know what day it is." "Sucks," Lance added. "I don't see my boys much. Both are serving?" Jerry nodded and said, "My daughter lives in California. My grandson Charlie just turned 2 years old. I'm going there next week." "That's great," I said. When my girls turned 17 and 18, I was starting to miss the little ones running around. They both nodded understandingly. After some time of small talk, we somehow got back to the subject of my wife. "Do you think she really forgot, or is she avoiding you on purpose?" asked Jerry. It was a great question that I've been pondering as well. I told them about the last few weeks, up until Friday's problems, and they shook their heads. "She's cheating on you," Lance said. Jerry nodded in agreement. "I can't believe it," I said. But as soon as he said it, I realized it was the only explanation that made sense, and I tried to believe it wasn't true. "Look, Bill," Lance said, "I've been through this before. The changes in behavior, the sudden night out in slut clothes, the disrespect, I've been through it, buddy. My wife fucked a coworker a couple times, and when I found out about it, I divorced her. Biggest mistake of my life." "What?" snapped back at me. "She cheated on you. How is divorcing her a mistake? In my opinion, there were no excuses. Treason is the end of a marriage, plain and simple. Period. End of story. Bill, I was broke for 5 years paying her child support and alimony. I missed her every damn day, loving her across town in my lonely apartment while she was alone in my house. She may have cheated on me, but at that moment I was too arrogant to forgive her. It's been 7 years, but we got back together after I pulled my head out of my ass. We're happy now." "Jesus," I said. "Giving her body to another man is the biggest insult and disrespect my wife is capable of. If what you say is true and she's having an affair, then she's either so involved with her lover that she's forgotten my birthday, or she's purposely blowing me off. Either of those options is unacceptable." Lance shook his head. "Bill, trust me. If you really love her, find a way to forgive her. You'll be better off in the long run. 40-year-old guys don't get second chances at love." "Thank you, Lance. You've given me a lot of food for thought." I may have said that, but what I was really thinking was that he was crazy. There was no way I could forgive her for cheating on me, and no way I could stay married to her. I shook both men's hands, wished them well, and left. As I sat on the couch browsing Facebook, it was almost dinner time. I saw my daughter's and wife's posts with pictures of their happy day and was saddened even more. Screw it, thought I. I needed to man up and stop acting like a lost child. My wife forgot my birthday. It happens. She forgot Father's Day. What's the difference? What mattered was that I was sure she had cheated on me on Friday night, and probably many times in the previous weeks she had acted strangely. Having her rub it in my face was supposed to be her ultimate goal. Well, she finished it well. It was time to get ready for the rest of my life. I decided to go out to dinner at my favorite restaurant. I knew it would be a long wait, and that was okay. I didn't have anything to do. So I took a shower, put on my sport coat and slacks, and went to get a steak. I was sitting at the bar of a steakhouse waiting for a table when an older man sat down in the empty seat next to me. He saw my bottle of champagne with one glass and frowned. Fortunately, he didn't say anything, just ordered a martini. As the bartender was filling my glass, the man apparently couldn't resist asking, "Are you celebrating alone, or am I taking someone else's place?" "No," I said, "it's okay. I'm alone here." He nodded and took a sip. He must have been in sales because he couldn't sit still. He said, "Yes, I'm waiting for my 3 generations of red rage. My wife is helping my daughter who broke her arm today. I guess she doesn't take well to having to do everything with her left hand." He laughed and continued, "You just don't expect your grown children to break bones. I thought those days were behind us." I agreed with his opinion and nodded. "Looks like I'll be cooking on my own for a few weeks. My wife will have to take care of Missy and Mia and leave me alone." I popped my head up. "What did you say?" Before he could answer, a little girl shouted from across the room, "Grandpa!" and rushed across the crowded bar. The little ball of red curls jumped into his lap and showered the man with hugs and kisses. A moment later I heard, "Bill!" I turned and saw Missy, and who I assumed was her mother, standing next to me. Her mother was a perfect portrait of her. Except for a few wrinkles around her eyes, they looked exactly alike. "Hey, Missy. How's your arm?" "It's okay. I'm on strong painkillers, so I don't feel anything special. It hurt like hell when they put it in, though." Missy introduced me to her parents, Jack and Mary, and then to her adorable little girl, Mia. "Where's your wife, Bill?" she asked. "I don't know. She took my girls to the beach this morning, and I haven't heard from them all day." "Really? On Father's Day?" "Worse, it's also my birthday today." "Oh my God! She blew you off on your best day of the year? What's her problem?" I didn't want to get into it and say more than I should, so I shrugged. "Well, forget about her." "You have to join us," Mary said firmly. I realized what Jack meant by his red rage. "I don't—" "Forget about it, Bill. You don't want them to militia on you. It's not nice," Jack said with a chuckle, indicative of his years of experience militiaing on them. "But it's your day, Jack." "I don't want to interfere." "Bullshit," he said. "This is our day." "Grandpa, you said—" "I know, Pumpkin. I said a bad word. Grandma will punish me later." "Daddy!" He winked at me as their table's buzzer sounded. "Pay up, Bill, and meet me at our table." "No payoff." He said it in the tone of a drill instructor. He tossed a 20 on the counter and left. "I'm sorry, Bill." "My parents can be thick-headed." "Don't worry, Missy. I suppose it's better than eating alone." Conversation over dinner was light. Bill and I told stories about our daughters growing up, and Mia asked lots of questions. She kept giggling at the awkward stories about her mom as a child. After dinner, my phone rang. I saw that it was my wife, ignored the call, and put the phone on the table. "Your wife?" asked Mary. "Yes." "It's more than you think, isn't it?" asked Missy. "I think so, but I have no proof." "Bill, everyone makes mistakes," Mary said, looking directly at Jack. "Maybe you can find a way to forgive her." Missy popped her head up and stared at Mary. I beckoned to the waiter and handed him my credit card. "Well, I've destroyed enough of your meeting. Thank you for inviting me to share a meal with you." "Bill, let me—" "No, Jack. It was an honor to have lunch with you and especially one of my favorite employees. It's on me. Happy Father's Day." I shook their hands and walked over to the waiter's counter to sign the check. I didn't even have hard evidence that she was cheating on me, but I'd already gotten 2 to 2 from people telling me I should forgive her. What's wrong with people? The phone rang over and over, but I ignored it. I pulled into my garage and was greeted by 2 whirling dervishes, showering me with kisses and hugs, apologizing for abandoning me on Father's Day. "Girls, don't worry about it. I don't expect you to remember when it's my birthday. "It's your birthday today?" yelled Jill. Then she ran into the house, yelling at my wife. "Daddy, we didn't know." "I'm so sorry," she sobbed against my chest. "You must hate us." "No, baby. I love you more than life itself." When she suggested last night that we go to the beach today, we jumped at the opportunity. "We didn't think—" "Baby, it's all right. Don't worry about it. I'm not mad at you." I didn't tell her I was mad at her mother, but that was my problem, not my daughter's. "Let's go inside." I walked through the kitchen, ignoring my wife crying and being scolded by my daughters, and went upstairs to change. Putting on shorts and a t-shirt, I returned to the war zone and found my wife sobbing alone. "I'm sorry," she muttered. I shook my head and went out on the deck with a beer and a cigar. It was a beautiful night, and I was enjoying the quiet, thinking about work instead of my wife, when the sliding door opened. "Bill, What's his name?" I asked, interrupting her. I didn't look at her, and she didn't go any farther out on the deck. "Bill." "What's his name?" "The man you had sex with on Friday." My anger was building. I heard the door close, but she didn't come out. She didn't deny it. That's when I realized I was going to see a divorce lawyer soon. Almost 20 years of marriage gone. What a stupid woman I'd married. At this point, I started thinking the worst. How long had she been cheating? Was he her first? Did I know him? Were these girls even mine? It's amazing what negative thoughts come into your head when you're treated so badly. I decided to request a paternity test for the girls as part of the divorce. It would not only be for my peace of mind, but also for Katie's embarrassment. I spent the rest of the night researching divorce laws online and then fell asleep on the couch. That's how I spent my birthday. I woke up at 5 in the morning. I found Katie in my bedroom, sound asleep, curled around her pillow. The funny thing was that she looked peaceful, unlike how poorly I had slept. Her body was naked and her ass was showing in her panties. She was so beautiful, too bad she wasn't mine anymore. I would have missed her body. I grabbed what I needed and took a quick shower. I managed to escape without waking her, but Jill was waiting for me in the hallway. "How bad is it, Dad?" I sighed. "This is as bad as it can get." "Can you forgive her?" "I mean, it's just one day's oblivion." "Honey, she didn't just forget my birthday or Father's Day. She cheated on me." She sighed. "No, Daddy. She wouldn't. She had to do it, but I won't accept it. Think about it. The last few weeks she's been acting strange. Friday night, after getting a tan and getting her hair done, she went out dressed like a whore. That was definitely not for me." She shook her head. "Babe, she avoided me all day Saturday and Sunday. She clearly had either guilt or hatred for me and didn't want to be around me at all. When has she ever taken you to the beach without me? It's always a family excursion. What if it's not an affair? What if it was just a one-time thing? Can't you forgive her for one time?" "I doubt that's true, honey, but look at all her actions. For once this weekend, has she acted like she loves me? Daddy, you didn't see the look on her face when Grandma called her to ask why she didn't call Grandpa to wish him a happy Father's Day. She dropped the phone and yelled, 'No!' So loud we thought Grandpa was having a heart attack or something. He's okay, Dad." Mom sobbed on her knees until we lifted her up and sat her on the couch. She kept saying over and over that she loved you. Honestly, Jenny wanted to call an ambulance for her. She thought she was going to have a breakdown. We calmed her down and managed to get her to call you. "Jill, I don't know what you want me to say. She doesn't love me. You can't cheat on your spouse and love your spouse. That's not an act of love, that's selfishness. Love must be selfless. When she became intimate with another man, she discarded me." She hugged me and cried. "I'm going to assume it wasn't some random guy she picked up at a bar. She must have flirted or accepted his flirting with her. There must have been intimate touching, perhaps kissing and caressing, all of which preceded her first sex with him. All of these actions leading up to sex are a betrayal to your spouse. You can't be in love with someone and show someone else intimate affection. Please don't divorce her. I have to go to work. I'll talk to you later." She walked into Jenny's room. I'll be sure to tell her about what we talked about. There would be no more secrets in our family. I wondered how much longer we would be a family. I knew Kathy would be too busy at work to try to call or text me, so I was calm most of the day. The only thing that made the day not quite normal was filling out the corporate forms related to Missy's accident. She would be compensated for her vacation, and I hoped she wouldn't be too worried. I didn't know anything about her personal life, except that she wasn't married. She came in to sign the forms and fill out the accident report. I wrote it for her, as she is not good with her left hand, and she signed it. "How are things at home?" she asked. "Not really." She didn't deny it when I told her about her affair. "Shit, Bill. I'm sorry. I'm sure you don't want to know my life story, but I understand how you feel. My ex-husband cheated on me while I was pregnant. I kicked him out before my daughter was born. My mom was furious. She basically called me a throwaway." "Jesus." "I thought it was weird when your mom mentioned last night that she forgave my wife. She was looking right at your father when she said that." "Yeah, I noticed that too. I'm not sure who exactly, but it makes me think one of them was cheating." "I'm sorry." "You shouldn't. They seem happy, so they're free to live as they please. I prefer never to trust a liar." "Me too," I said firmly. Kathy wasn't home when I got home from work. She was probably having sex with her stud, and I was pissed. I got back in the car and drove the 2 miles to her grocery store. I saw her car in the parking lot, and to my surprise, I saw her sitting in it with a young man. When I stopped in front of her car, she noticed me, and I saw her yell, "No!" She opened the door, but I had time to leave. If she was going to cheat on me, he could have taken her. I'm done. I drove home and ran upstairs to pack. I planned to stay in a hotel until I found an apartment. Before I knew it, Jenny and Jill were crying and begging me to stay. "Sorry, girls, but your mom was just about to cheat on me when I caught her. She was in the car with some guy when I pulled up beside her. Dad, this has to be a mistake." "Girls, I know what I saw. She had a man in her car. Why would she stay after work and have a man in her car if she wasn't going to take him somewhere? She can't say they were just having lunch. There is no innocent explanation for her sitting in the back parking lot after work with a man in her car." "Daddy, please don't break up our family," Jenny sobbed. "Honey, your mother ruined our family. It's not my fault." I hugged them and kissed their cheeks. "I love you girls. I'll be in touch every day." I left them crying in the bedroom and went to the garage. As I drove out of the garage, I was almost hit by Katie, speeding away. I shook my head and drove on. The next week was nothing short of pure hell. I refused to take my wife's calls, and for the first 3 days she called me every hour on the hour. She must have taken a week's vacation because she couldn't call from the shop floor and had to be on the job site all day. She left countless messages begging me to call her. I deleted every one of them. After those 3 days, my mother, mother-in-law, both daughters, and Kathy's sister begged me to talk to her. They all said it wasn't as bad as I thought, but every time I asked them if she had cheated on me, they wouldn't answer. They all knew she had. They just wouldn't admit it. I stopped taking everyone's calls. I told my daughters I would talk to them, but their mother was not to be mentioned. I had to hang up twice before they believed I was serious. At the end of the week, I met with a lawyer. I wanted to just split the house in half. She could own the house until the girls moved out. Then we would sell it. The lawyer said I could get more than half of the proceeds for the house since my contribution to the down payment and monthly payment is more than Kathy's, but I told him to just split everything equally. I thought alimony or maintenance was a done deal, but it turns out that since my wife makes enough money to support herself on her own, I don't have to pay her anything. That was the best news I've heard in a while. I don't have to pay her to fuck her lover. The only catch was that I had no proof of her cheating. The judge might not allow it and reduce it to irreconcilable differences, and I'd have to prove that we were trying to work things out. I'd take my chances. My attorney was preparing to file for divorce, and life went on. There would be no forced mediation or counseling. There would be no lawsuits for alienation of affection. There would be no drawn-out fight. The split was fair, and any judge could see that even blindfolded. But nothing comes easy. What she could do was fight. When she was handed the papers, she unleashed her family barrage on me again. Turns out she only fucked a guy once that Friday before my birthday, or she convinced everyone that she did. I was labeled as the bad guy because I wouldn't let her explain. As if any explanation would have been acceptable. My mother basically called me a wuss because I didn't fight for my marriage. My mother-in-law told me that we are even because I too broke my vows by not staying with her during the hardest times. My daughters told me that I should stay in the family because our divorce would scar them for life. It was unreal. I hadn't done anything wrong, but I was being accused of divorce. It got to the point where I asked my daughters to give their saliva for a DNA test. They refused until I lied to them and told them it was a court order. Kathy wrote me a letter that was mailed to my store. I read it, and it said she was caught up in a kid's attention to her. I say kid because the bastard was only 21 years old. They'd only had sex once in the backseat of his car, and sexually he'd turned out to be worthless. Like the fact that he turned out to be a loser was supposed to fix everything? She also said that when I caught her in the car with a guy, I told him privately to never talk to her again. It didn't matter. She cheated on me once and once was enough. The best part was that because she gave me the letter, I didn't have to prove cheating for the divorce. She did it on her own. That meant I didn't have to file an irreconcilable differences claim and prove that we were trying to work things out. Karma was finally on my side. She tried to resist the divorce, but when the judge saw the terms I proposed and her letter confirming the infidelity, he approved it. I was supposed to be divorced in 60 days. And so I found myself alone on an island of desolation. For refusing to talk to her, I was labeled as immature and an asshole. It got to the point where my mother and my daughters stopped talking to me. It hurt, but I was on the side of righteousness, and if they didn't like it, well, I called my daughters every day. They never answered, but I left voice messages telling them what was going on with me and asking what was going on in their lives. I didn't let them blame me for our lack of communication. I continued to make every effort and get in touch with them, whether they wanted me to or not. One thing that changed was that I started having coffee with Missy on Sundays. It started innocently enough when we ran into each other at a local coffee shop. She and Mia lived in the neighborhood and were out for a walk. I invited them to join me and told her about my suffering while Mia watched cartoons on my iPad. "I'm sure your daughters will come around, Bill," she said. "They're young, impressionable, and living with your wife. There's no telling what nonsense she's put in their heads." I hope you're right. I just hope they're not too far gone. I miss them like hell. The next week, I walked into the same store at the same time and was reading when I heard, "Hey, stranger." I smiled and invited them to join me again. "Is this normal for you, or are you stalking me?" she asked with a smile. "No, I live nearby and I like to have a cup of coffee and read on Sunday mornings. It's kind of lonely at home, so I come here." She sipped from her cup and we chatted about the neighborhood until we parted ways. It wasn't a conscious decision to meet every Sunday, but we did. I enjoyed her company and little Mia was a delight. The day the divorce became final, I knocked on the front door of my old house. My wife answered, and it was obvious she was crying. She didn't say a word, just invited me in. "Are the girls home?" I asked. "They're watching the musical at school." "I know why you're here. I expected you to come tonight." "Really?" I asked with a smirk. "You waited until it was too late to stop it, didn't you?" "Yes," I said. "I knew you would beg and plead and tug at my heart trying to make up, and I couldn't let that happen. You broke my heart, and there's no way I'm forgiving you." "Damn it, Bill. It was one time. One bad mistake. Why couldn't you forgive me? Why couldn't you find a way to stay with me? Didn't you love me as much as I loved you all those years ago?" I laughed. "Did you love me when you flirted with your douche? Did you love me when you avoided me all weekend and left me alone on my birthday? If that's your idea of love, you're beyond help." "I never wanted this to happen," she sobbed. "I never wanted a cheating whore as a wife either, but here we are, we met." She gasped and started to speak before I interrupted her. "Katie, not only did you break my heart, but you turned my mother and my daughters against me. I will never forgive you for that either. It's your fault for acting irrationally." I got angry and said, "If you don't make my mother and my daughters apologize to me and make things right, I will tell every man you date that you are a cheating whore. I will try to ruin every relationship you have in the future because you ruined mine. I don't need anyone else." "Wrong answer. I guess I'll have to find other ways to hurt you and embarrass you." I got up to leave and she grabbed my arm. "It's not my fault." "You can't blame me." "Oh no? Did I cheat on you?" "I don't think so. You know what's really disgusting? You allow your daughters to grow up believing that cheating on their husbands is acceptable. Because of your behavior, they'll go into adulthood assuming you're a saint and I'm a sinner, and it's okay because it was a one-time thing. Well, f it. I'm not going to go down because some asshole made you feel sexy. I pulled her hand away from mine and said, "Rotten hell for leaving our marriage. Just having sex with you, whore." I left her crying and wasn't upset about it. A few weeks later, Missy knocked on my office door. "Got a second, Bill?" "Sure, come on in." I frowned as she closed the door, expecting something bad to happen now. "Bill, does the company have a rule against dating other employees?" I hated it when she asked me that. I was hoping I'd be able to ask her out. Looks like I was too late. "No. We have a strict sexual harassment policy. This policy protects just about anything that can be damaged by a failed relationship between coworkers, and if two people can't work together after a breakup, it's their fault, not the company's." "Good. That's exactly what I was hoping for," she said, placing a folded piece of paper on my desk. "What's that?" I asked. "My address and phone number. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow night for dinner. Mia will be joining us." I smiled and agreed. "Good. You're a good man, Bill. You deserve to be happy, and I want to give you a second chance at happiness." She popped out of my office with a cute spring in her step, and I looked forward to our dinner. "Hey, it's Dad. I hope you and your sister are doing well. Business as usual in my world, except a woman at work asked me out to dinner. Well, anyway, I love you and miss you. Please call me soon. Bye." I knew this message would cause some problems, but I didn't care. I needed to move on, and I was glad to see that Missy had taken over, as she had before. Missy was a beautiful woman with an even more beautiful character. Her daughter was very well developed and adorable, and I had already met her parents. I felt like I was finally ahead of the curve. Only 15 minutes had passed when Katie texted me, "I can't believe you're already dating. You're a real bastard." I laughed when I read this. I never realized how delusional she was. To think that I would sit there and worry about her was insane. Maybe some guys would mourn the loss of their marriage at the hands of a cheating wife, but that wasn't me. At 41, I was young enough to find love again. Hell, I was young enough to have more kids if I wanted to. That was worth thinking about. Missy was in her early 30s. She might want to have more kids. I knew it was too early for such thoughts, but as a single mom, these things were probably high on Missy's list of potential suitors. I'm sure she was looking for a husband, not a toy. Though I certainly didn't mind being her toy. I hadn't gotten laid in months. The next evening, I showered and shaved after work and dressed casually. Looking in the mirror, I didn't mind what I saw. I was in good shape with no extra wheels or love handles. I had a full head of brown hair that had yet to show gray. I had a great job that paid well and had money in the bank. I considered myself a pretty good catch for any woman, let alone a young one like Missy. That's when I realized I had no idea how to date someone. When you are married, you are always together and know everything about each other. There was no problem holding hands or kissing. When you came home after a night out, you knew sex was just around the corner. The status quo was comfortable. Oh my God! I had to relearn how to have sex. I knew every point on my ex-wife's body that gave her pleasure. I just had to hope that the next woman I had sex with liked the same thing, or at least had a good relationship with her. I was afraid I wasn't ready to date and regretted getting into the dating scene so quickly. I knocked on the door of her house with a bottle of wine, flowers, and a stuffed animal. I decided it wouldn't hurt to gain Mia's favor. When she opened the door, I was shocked by what I saw. Her curly red hair was loose around her shoulders, and she was wearing the perfect amount of makeup. She was wearing a roomy sundress that came down about 4 inches above her knees, showing off her beautiful legs. She was barefoot, and her toes were painted a hot pink color to match her fingernails. She laughed and asked, "Do I pass the test?" "God, yes," I said, before I could take back my words. She laughed even harder and took the flowers and wine from me. "Mia is watching TV. Go tell her hello. She'll love the bear." She left for the kitchen and I knelt down next to Mia. "Hi, sweetie. I brought you a bear cub." She looked at me apprehensively and then lit up the room with her smile. She held out her hands for the bear and ran to show it to Missy as soon as she picked it up. It brought back fond memories of Jenny and Jill at the same age. I realized how long it had been since we had talked to them, and I missed them even more. "What's wrong?" asked Missy, breaking me from my thoughts. I smiled forcibly and replied, "Nothing. I was just thinking about my daughters when they were Mia's age." "Is it really that bad?" she asked. "They still won't talk to me. Kathy has turned them against me, and I can't change their minds. But I'm still trying. I leave them messages every day, and I'm not going to stop." "I'm so sorry, Bill." "I know this is terrible for you. Every day. But I know they listen to my messages. I told them about our date tonight, and Katie texted me to tell me I was an asshole for getting to the point so quickly." "Sorry, that's not too fast, is it?" She bit her lip and looked pretty damn cute while doing it. "Maybe," I answered honestly, "but I'd be happy to find out with you." She smiled and took my hand. "Dinner is ready. I hope you like pasta with meat sauce." "Sounds great." "Oh, I have garlic bread too, so you should be ready for us to make out on the couch later." Mia giggled, and I stood there shocked that Missy had gotten so candid. She saw my awkwardness and said, "Bill, we're both adults, and I've known you for 3 years. I know what kind of man you are, and it doesn't take much to realize that I really like you. You're going to be a hot commodity soon, and I want to stake my claim early." "Hot stuff?" I asked. "Yep. You have no idea how much buzz the news of your divorce has caused at the store. Honey, your appearance on the market, so to speak, has caught the attention of many unmarried ladies. You're a handsome man in good shape, you're smart, stable, and we all know how you feel about fidelity." When I sat down at her table, I felt quite good. "So I'm getting in line early," she finished. I took her hand and squeezed it. "I like you too." Mia, not wanting to be left out, said, "Sketty is my favorite." "I like Sketty too." "The fattier the better," I said. Seeing a jar of Parmesan cheese on the table, I added, "And you must have really stinky cheese." She giggled and replied, "It's not stinky cheese. It's Parm. "Stinky cheese," I said, bringing the jar up to my nose and imagining it was the worst smell ever. "Wow, this is really stinky cheese." Missy shook her head as I handed the jar to Mia. She sniffed it, shrugged, and poured a generous portion over the spaghetti. Over dinner, we kept up a light conversation. I asked about Mia's preschool class and her friends. She easily told me all the details she could remember. I enjoyed the conversation immensely. After a while, I realized that Missy wasn't talking. She was smiling broadly and just watching her daughter and I exchange a few phrases. Eventually, she started collecting plates and I said, "Let me help." "Oh no. She hasn't told you about her favorite TV shows yet." She laughed as Mia started telling me about all the best children's shows. After putting Mia to bed, Missy came back and sat next to me on the couch. I handed her a glass of wine and she sighed contentedly, putting her feet up on the poof. I love being a mom, but sometimes it's the best part of the day for me. Instinctively, I put my arms around her. When she snuggled up to me, I said, "It's worse with two." "You bet. Do you think your girls will come around?" "I hope so," I replied thoughtfully. "I'm doing my best right now, but it's still raw for them." She turned and kissed my cheek. "You're a great father. Just don't give up the fight for them." She set down her glass and leaned back in her chair. "Bill, I've already told you that I really like you, and I'm too old to play the will we or won't we game. I'd like to keep seeing you, and that includes inviting you into my bedroom." I was about to tell her we didn't have to do that, but she raised her finger. "I know you want to be a gentleman and all, but you don't have to be. What I'm trying to say is that I don't want to be your girlfriend having sex with you or a friend with privileges. I'm warning you that I'm looking for an exclusive relationship. I have a daughter to think about, and frankly, she needs a daddy just as much as I need a husband." I tried to speak again, but was again rebuffed. This conversation usually ends with the guy picking himself up and running away. I don't think you're like that, but I'm giving you a way out. If you want to sow your oats and experience the single life, I'm not your girl. If, however, you want to see if we have a chance at a long life, I'm your woman. "Wow," I said. "Did you prepare that speech, or was it given on the fly?" She frowned, misinterpreting my feelings. "Missy, as you said, We've known each other in a working relationship for 3 years now. The last few weeks of having coffee together have been very pleasant. I'm a family man, that's all I've ever been. I don't know how to be single, and the thought of dating scares the hell out of me. If my wife could keep her legs shut, I'd still be a happily married family man. No, I don't want to play on that field. She smiled and took my hand. I continued, You're beautiful, smart, and you make great spaghetti. She laughed and playfully clapped me on the shoulder. I'd like to be your boyfriend. Consider me part of creating something good for all of us, including your little girl. We didn't make love that night. As much as I wanted to take her right there on the couch, I decided it was best not to rush things. She had practically confessed her love to me and was very aroused, and I decided that for my comfort, it was best to take my time. I received a gift from the gods when I received an application for a managerial position. I never learned the name of the brat who ruined my marriage and couldn't get back at him. But when he showed up for an interview for the night manager position, I recognized him immediately. I knew he would never recognize me, but he might recognize my name, so I asked Anne to interview him and hire him on the spot. On the second night of his job, I waited in the parking lot for him to start his shift. I walked over to his 90s car and put a 40-inch TV I had bought from a competitor in the back seat. We had the same model, and I happened to know that one of them happened to be in stock. In the morning, I timed my arrival to coincide with the end of his shift. I walked him to his car, chatting about what he thought of his crew of guys. When we got to the car, I noticed the TV in the back seat and pretended to be shocked. Jeff, did you buy a TV before your shift? We're not open yet. No, Bill. It's not mine. I don't know how it got there. Jeff, I think we need to go back to the store. Bill, you have to believe me. Check the cameras. I shook my head and said, Okay. Bring the TV. We went back to the store and the baby was scared to death. At one point, I thought he was going to cry. We didn't have night security because since the store closed for the night and had a night crew working there, we didn't need it. We had cameras everywhere and only one place the cameras could be turned off. Only the managers had the key to that room. The camera was pointed at the door to the room, but it was above the doorway to the stairwell. I mentioned this to security a few years ago, but they never fixed the problem. Then I easily opened the door to the stairwell, walked over and covered the camera with a piece of black duct tape. I then disabled the security camera system. Well, technically I shut down the computer that controlled the system. When I brought him into the room and he saw that the computer wasn't working, he panicked and continued to plead his innocence while I called the police, as per the rules. When all was said and done, the guy was convicted of a misdemeanor and got no jail time. I was hoping he'd get a couple months, but it wasn't an expensive enough TV. He had to do a bunch of community service and pay a fine, which oddly enough was more than I paid for the TV. With a felony on his record, he'd also have a hard time finding a retail job. That made me happier, but still not worth the risk I took. The corporation increased security by installing cameras in the parking lot. They were long overdue. He was so stupid he never realized I did it. He tried to blame the team for setting him up, but he couldn't prove anything. They didn't miss him when I fired him. On a chilly Saturday morning, a week after dinner with Missy, I saw her waiting in the car to stay warm. When I parked next to her, she met me at the door and greeted me with a kiss. Are we still having dinner tonight? She asked. Absolutely. Okay. I have something special I'm cooking for us. You won't want to miss it. I wouldn't. Is that the tramp? Asked Katie from behind me, interrupting me. Excuse me? Shouted Missy, unclenching her claws completely. Katie, what do you want? I asked, getting annoyed. I've been trying to call you. Did you block my number? Yeah. After your 30 messages about how I'm an asshole for continuing to live, I'm done. What do you want? I want to talk about the girls. We need to deal with college. They can go wherever they want. I took care of the money for them. I'd like to be a part of it, but since you poisoned them against me, they won't talk to me. They're afraid you won't pay your tuition. Of course I'll pay for it. I still love them, even though because you can't keep your legs closed, I lost them in the divorce. Missy laughed. Katie glared at her and said, It's not my fault you couldn't forgive me for one slip-up. Oh? One slip-up? It was only once because you weren't tactful. I dealt with you right away. It doesn't matter. You should still be my husband. We should still be a family. You're delusional. You cost me my marriage, my family, my daughters, and my mother. I swear you better never date a man if I find out about this. You'll never see a second date. No one wants to date a cheating whore, unless they know about your reputation and are looking for easy sex. I turned and walked toward the store. I heard yelling behind me, and when I turned around, I saw that Missy had Katie pinned against the car, jabbing her finger in her face. Stay away from my man, bitch. You threw him away and I picked him up. I ran up and pulled her away. Stop it, Missy. She's not worth this kind of trouble. You heard me, bitch, shouted Katie, and turned and walked toward the store. Please go away, Katie. It's over between us and it's your fault. Yours and yours alone. I left her sobbing by the car. I caught up with my panting Missy and took her hand. She looked up and smiled at me, slowing down. I'm sorry, Bill. I guess I was being too territorial. Oh no! I like it when women fight over me in the parking lot. It's great for my ego. We laughed and went inside to get some work done. Later that morning, my mom called me. When I answered, she mumbled, Billy, She didn't finish, and I heard a knock, but the call didn't end. I hung up and called back, but there was no answer. I called 911 to have them send an ambulance to her, but was told the call had already come from her house. I feared the worst and asked Anne to cover for me since I had to go. She understood, and as I ran through the store, I ran past Missy, who yelled after me. I ignored her and ran straight to my car. When I got to my mom's house, the ambulance was already pulling away, and I followed it. When I got to the back doors, I found that she was gone before the ambulance arrived at the hospital. She must have passed out while we were on the phone. I cried, sitting in the lobby of the emergency room. I sat there alone and thought about the last word my mom had said to me. What was she going to say? Maybe it was, am I in trouble? Am I having a heart attack? I'm sorry? The phone rang and it was Missy. Hey, my mom just died. Oh, Bill. I'm so sorry. Yes, thank you. I'm afraid I won't be good company tonight. No, I'll be with you. You need me, please let me come. Okay, yes, I said. I didn't want to be alone and I was glad she'd agreed to be with me. I'm on my way home. I'll meet you there after you get out. Okay. I'll see you soon. I finished talking and went to my car. Instead of driving home, I drove to my old house. I needed to tell my girls, whether they wanted to see me or not. As I pulled up to the house, I saw both girls' cars in the driveway and sighed. I had never imagined that the first words we would say to each other would be such news. I didn't care that I didn't live there anymore. I entered the code into the garage door opener and stepped inside. Kathy's car wasn't there, and I was glad for that. I don't think I was in the right state of mind to see her. The living room and kitchen were empty, so I went upstairs to the bedrooms. Daddy! Yelled Jill as I walked into her room. What do you want? Shouted Jenny, coming in after me. Did you come to beg? Well, you can go to... Grandma had a heart attack and died this morning, I said, interrupting her. They both gasped. I just thought I should tell you this in person. Now I'm going to hell. I walked out and closed the door behind me. I heard Jenny yell for me to wait, but I ran to my car and drove away. I went to the little lake where I spent so much happy time with the girls. It was too cold for boats, but the water was starting to thaw and was very calm. I sat down on the picnic bench and cried again. This time I cried not only for my mother, but for the loss of my daughters. The fury in Jenny's voice told me that I wasn't needed in her life. She didn't need to tell me to go to hell. Her tone said it all for her. I wondered if I'd made a mistake along the way. Not with Katie, but with the girls. What had I done so wrong that made them hate me so much? Katie was the one who ruined our marriage. Why can't my daughters understand that? I don't know how long I sat there, but I heard someone approach. I turned around and it was Katie and the girls. How did you find me here? I asked, turning around to look at the lake again. You didn't turn off the synchronization of our Find a Phone app, Kathy said. Bill, I'm sorry about your mom. Yeah? I spat. Do you regret her death or the fact that you turned her against me and she died without ever making up? She didn't say anything. Leave me alone. I can't deal with your shit right now, I continued. I'll never forgive you for what you did to me. The last time we talked, she told me she wouldn't talk to me again until I came to my senses and backed out of the divorce. She didn't even say she loved me when she hung up on me. I'm so sorry, Bill. For everything. I heard her leave and Jenny said, Dad, we're sorry too. Please forgive us for being bitches. I turned around and they both rushed over to hug me. We cried in each other's arms for what seemed like an eternity. It's not my fault, girls. Why can't you realize that what your mother did is the reason we're no longer together? We're sorry, Dad, Jill said. We just thought you should forgive her. She loves you, it's so obvious. Not enough to keep me faithful, Jill. I'm sorry, girls. I'm so sorry. We hugged again while Kathy watched from the warm car. Girls, I need you so much. You'll be leaving for college soon, and I'm going to miss you. We're wasting so much time. We get it, Daddy, Jenny said. We're not going to shut you out anymore, Jill added. I wish your grandmother had a chance to do the same. Daddy, can we come with you? We haven't seen your new house yet. Maybe we could get a pizza. Sure, tell your mom and let's go. When I pulled into my driveway, I saw Missy's car. I forgot she was coming. Girls, it looks like you're going to meet Missy. Is she your girlfriend? They asked in unison, making me laugh. Yeah, well, we just started dating. Look how he's blushing, Jenny. It's so cute. They jumped out of the car and were at Missy's door in a flash. They peppered her with questions, and I could see that Missy didn't understand what was going on. Girls, leave her alone. Carry her into the house and I'll introduce you all. They kissed me on the cheek and scurried off to my garage, and I walked over to a shocked Missy. Sorry about that, I said when she opened the door. She smiled radiantly and kissed my cheek. Your daughters? Mm-hmm. Come on, you'll be formally introduced. I wish I knew, dear. I must look awful. I laughed and replied, You're fine. They'll like you. Jenny, Jill? I want you to meet Missy. They hugged. Jenny, as usual, cheekily declared, You're super hot. Jill jumped up and said, Good for you, Daddy. Missy laughed and I was too shocked to say anything. Hey, let's take a quick look around the house, and then I have some things to take care of for Grandma's services. Bill, I'll order some pizzas while you show them around. Sounds good to me, darling. You read my mind. Oh, the girls cooed. I shook my head as Missy smiled. I decided that I would wait until the next morning to call and spread the word about my mom. I'll write an obituary in Monday's paper and post details of the service on Facebook after visiting the funeral home on Sunday. After dinner, we sat around and spent hours telling Missy stories about my mom. My girls, not so innocently, added a few embarrassing stories about me to keep Missy more interested. It wasn't my fault the pier was wet and I fell in the lake, I swear. Before I knew it, it was 10. Girls, time is slipping away from me and it's getting late. They frowned and asked, Can we stay the night? I don't have beds for the guest rooms yet. Tell you what, I'll pick you up in the morning and we'll go out to breakfast, okay? If you don't mind, I could use some help figuring out what to do with Grandma's stuff too. Of course, Dad. We'll help if we need it. Thank you. Missy, do you want to go for a ride? Or do you need to go home to Mia? She's staying with my parents. Jill jumped up. Who's Mia? Mia is my 4-year-old daughter. They both squealed, and Jenny said, Oh my God, I can't wait to meet her. Missy laughed at their excitement and said, Someday soon, I promise. Okay, let's go. They're great girls, Missy said, as we sat on the couch shortly after returning to my house. I'm glad you were able to get back together with them. I sighed. Me too. I just wish it didn't require my mom's death. She snuggled into my arms, and I fell asleep with my arms around her. When I woke up in the morning, she had covered us with a blanket and was still snuggled up against me. I missed being so close to someone. I kissed the top of her head and said, I'm sorry I fell asleep on you. She moaned, stretching. It's okay, baby. you've had a very emotional day. Would you like to join me and the girls for breakfast? Only if I can take Mia with me. My parents have plans for this morning. Of course. My daughters will like her. Since we needed to pick up Mia, I asked my daughters to meet us at IHOP. When I walked in holding Mia's hand, my girls rushed to her. Within seconds, Mia was in their arms, twirled in the air, and then they tickled her and covered her with kisses. She squealed and giggled the whole time with a huge smile, to the point of yelling, "I have to go to the bathroom." The girls said in unison, "We'll take her," and scurried off to the bathroom. I don't know, Missy. Do you think they'll get along? I asked with a smirk. She playfully clapped me on the shoulder and kissed my cheek. I hope it stays that way for years to come, she said. She was set for the long term, and technically we only had one date. It was a little unnerving, but I was confident I could handle the feeling. As we ate, Mia and my daughters talked nonstop about everything. I could see in my eyes that Mia loved to talk, and not just about herself. She asked so many questions about my daughters' lives that I think even my girls were surprised. My daughters were neighborhood babysitters, so interacting with young children was their forte. They knew all the hot kids shows and movies, and Mia ate them out of the palm of her hand. They also got along well with Missy. There was no hostility or display of anger when I dated her, which shocked me. They refused to talk to me for months after the divorce, but as soon as they met my new girlfriend, they immediately became best friends. I didn't understand that, and I'm going to have to try and get some sort of explanation from the girls. After making dozens of phone calls, starting the long process of cleaning my mom's house, and visiting the funeral home, I was finally able to sit down and relax. The girls got back to my house for dinner, and Missy and Mia split off in different directions after breakfast. Missy decided it would be too emotional for us, and wanted to avoid the discomfort of Mia asking questions about everything while we sorted things out at my mom's house. "Daddy, are you in love with Missy?" asked Jenny suddenly. We've only seen each other a couple times outside of work. It's a little early to call it love. Okay, Dad, Jill said like I was an idiot. Have you seen those good old cartoons where the girls' eyes flutter open and they fold their palms against their cheeks as they look at their prince? I nodded, taking a bite of a slice of pizza. Well, she practically has hearts floating around in her head when she looks at you and flaps her eyes, Jill said. Before I could deny that she liked me, they looked at each other, turned to me and said, "We like her." I went from excited to see my daughters to angry. I threw my piece on my plate, wiped my hands, and went to the sink. Leaning on the counter facing them, I tried to calm down. "Daddy?" asked Jenny. "Girls, how can you break my heart all this time and now sit there and tell me you like my girlfriend? What have I done to you to make you think it's okay to shut me out? Ignore me? Tell me to go to hell when I see you for the first time in my life? What did I do? Do you know how many times I cried after leaving you a message I knew you didn't care to receive? Mom made us." "What?" shouted I. Jill replied, "It all started when my mom told us, if you think you're losing us, come back to her and we'll be a family again. We are so sorry." I turned around and Jenny, seeing a tear on my cheek, rushed to hug me. "Dad, we're sorry. After it didn't work, she told us that you left us and weren't going to pay for college because we wanted you to stay with her. She told us that the messages you left were just a ploy you used in the divorce to make it seem like you were the good guy to please the judge. And you believed that. Dad, how would you react sitting with her day after day and hearing her defend her one-time mistake against 20 years of love? We thought you were being unreasonable." "What about me? Would you let your boyfriend cheat on you?" I didn't get an answer. "Where does the border run?" I asked decisively. "Once? 2? 5? Answer me!" They started crying and we hugged. Their hugs immediately calmed me down and I felt awful. "I'm sorry, girls. I missed you guys so much." After each of them confessed their love to me, I said, "It's time to bring you home. You have school tomorrow. Don't forget to have your mom tell them about the wake and funeral. You're going to need some free time this week." We hugged one more time and I watched with warmth in my heart as they drove away. I looked up at the sky and said, "You didn't have to go to bring the girls back to me, Mom, but thank you. I'll miss you." Wakes are hard for me because I always felt uncomfortable sitting in a room with a dead body. My mom's wake was especially hard. Throughout the day, I walked over to the casket several times and looked at her. She looked peaceful. I was glad that she would see my father again. A few years before, he had died of cancer. He wanted a different kind of funeral without a wake. He, like me, thought it was strange for people to interact with a corpse. Mom had it all planned out. I guess you get older when you think about things like that. She'd even picked out the casket. All I had to do was set a time and day and take care of the small details of setting up the room and the service. I was glad she had done that. I was standing at the front of the room talking to one of her friends when Katie and my girls walked in. My daughters greeted me with warm, tear-filled hugs, and Katie gratefully left me alone. After saying the prayer, Kathy put something in the casket and went to the back of the room where she sat alone. I looked to see what she had put in there, and it was a picture of Kathy and me hugging my mom. She was holding each of our babies in her arms, and a smile a mile wide shone on her face. I picked up the photograph she had hidden away and reverently placed it next to her hands. It was the first time I cried that day. Later, the priest wanted to begin the prayer service. Kathy never left her seat at the back of the room. She engaged everyone. You can't be a family member for as long as she was married and not recognize people, and they all loved her. The protocol was for the immediate family to sit in the front row of chairs. My girls sat on my right and Misty on my left, but that felt wrong. I stood up and turned around. I saw Katie, who was still standing in the back of the room, wiping tears from her eyes. It didn't seem right to me. My mom wouldn't have wanted this. Kathy was as much a daughter to her as she was a wife to me. I walked to the back of the hall. When everyone was sitting and waiting for the service to begin, they noticed me and started following me. I held out my hand to Katie. "Come here to me. You don't need to hide here." She started sobbing and hugged me. Letting go of me, she whispered, "Thank you." We walked to the front of the hall, and my Uncle John gave her his seat, which was next to my daughter. "You're a good man, Bill," Missy whispered, kissing my cheek. It was the strangest feeling of my life, holding Missy's hand when my ex-wife was only a few feet away from me. I prayed that I wouldn't regret it later and have a problem with them. As we were wrapping up the day, I was saying goodbye to the last of the visitors when Kathy came up to me. With Missy next to me, I wondered how Katie would behave. I hoped she wouldn't start a fight out of respect for my mother. "Bill, thank you for inviting me into the family today. It means more than you can imagine. She loved you like a daughter. It was the right thing to do." "Oh, that reminds me. If you want, you can ride in the limo with us and the girls tomorrow." She hugged me and cried. I felt Missy's hand on my waist, and I was afraid a fight was coming. "Well," Katie said, breaking the embrace, "if you don't want anything from me, I'll go home." I shook my head negatively, and she smiled briefly at Missy. "I'm glad you're here for him. You may not know it, but he was a mama's boy. It's going to be really hard on him soon that she's gone." With those words, she turned and left the room. Missy hugged me from all sides and said, "Let's get you home." I threw my keys in my locker and made my way to the kitchen, glad the day was over. Missy was sitting at the table, accepting a cold beer from me. "I think things with Kathy went better than you expected." "You handled it well," she said as I enjoyed my cold Sam Adams. "Yeah, I'm glad. I was really expecting her to start something with you." "Well, I'm sure the girls helped with that. We just need to get through tomorrow and we'll be fine." I hoped she was right. I don't know why I got the uneasy feeling that Katie wouldn't be able to handle dealing with Missy. I guess I'm just paranoid. "Will you stay the night with me?" I asked. She smiled and took my hand. "You couldn't kick me out even if you tried." We didn't make love, but she was spooning with me, and it was the best sleep I'd had since the divorce. "You're watching me like a hawk." "I'm not going to abuse your gift by getting into an argument," Kathy said as we waited for prayer to begin. "I know that," I lied. "I'm just uncomfortable with it." She snorted and asked, "How do you think I feel? I'm an outcast here? A whore?" I frowned. "No one thinks that about you. Especially not today." "I'm sorry, Bill. I wish I could make it never happen. I wish." She cried and hurried to the bathroom. "It's hard on all of us, Bill," my mother's friend Jean said, patting me on the shoulder. "Your mom was a wonderful woman and we'll all miss her." I kissed her cheek and thanked her, glad that Katie had her mom's back to her tears. After the funeral, we were seated at a table at my mother's favorite Polish restaurant. The room was full, and Kathy looked uncomfortable as she searched for an empty seat. I approached her again and led her by the hand to the table where Missy and my daughters were sitting. Kathy, we will always be a family no matter the divorce. No matter where we sit, you will always be welcome. A tear rolled down her cheek as she sat up and thanked me. I don't know when I got over it, but I felt like I'd finally forgotten the pain she'd caused. Life went on. The girls went to college and Skype with me every week. Missy and I are still together, and I am very close to popping the question. Katie and I communicate infrequently but cordially. She is also moving on with her life, dating the divorced father of a friend of one of the girls. He's a nice guy. I hope things work out for them. Some will say I should have forgiven her for the one-time slip-up, but I just can't do that. I may be the bad guy in some people's minds, but I can live with